Hello there. Take a deep breath and let your thoughts settle for a moment. The noise of the day begins to fade, replaced by quiet curiosity. What if I told you that right now, even as you listen, your mind is choosing what to notice and what to ignore? This is the silent gatekeeper within your brain, the part that decides which sounds, colors, and thoughts are worth your attention, and which ones disappear into the background without you ever realizing. This is the selective attention bias, the quiet illusion that filters reality itself. Imagine walking through a busy marketplace, vendors calling out prices, footsteps overlapping, music echoing from a distance, yet somehow you can still hear the voice of the friend walking beside you. Your brain tunes the rest out. It focuses, like a spotlight shining on only one performer, while the rest of the stage remains dim. This is not just a convenience, it's survival. If your brain absorbed every sound, every flash of light, every movement around you, it would collapse under the weight of sensory chaos. So, it filters. And those filters quietly sculpt the world you believe you see. But that same filter, the one that helps you stay focused, can also create blind spots. Important details can vanish, not because your eyes failed, but because your attention did. A conversation, a warning sign, a subtle emotion on someone's face, gone in an instant, erased by your focus on something else. Your mind doesn't mean to deceive you, but it does. And what you don't notice can sometimes matter more than what you do. Think about the famous experiment, a group of people passing a basketball back and forth. Viewers are told to count the number of passes. In the middle of the game, a person dressed in a gorilla suit walks through the scene, beats their chest, and leaves. When asked later, nearly half the participants never saw the gorilla. Their eyes saw it, but their attention did not. That's the strange beauty of selective attention. It makes us masters of focus, but prisoners of our own filters. In your daily life, selective attention shapes how you see truth. When you believe someone is unfriendly, you notice the times they avoid eye contact. You might miss their small kindness, the smile, the quiet wave, the door they held open last week. Your brain locks onto what matches your belief, tuning out the rest. Without realizing it, you build a version of reality that confirms your expectations. This bias doesn't just distort what you see, it shapes who you think people are. At work, it appears in subtle ways. A manager expecting mistakes in a report might focus only on errors, skipping over the brilliant insights hidden between the lines. A teacher might overlook a student's quiet creativity because their attention is drawn to louder, more visible behavior. Even in friendships and love, this bias whispers through. When you expect someone to disappoint you, you notice every small flaw. When you expect them to care, you notice every small gesture of affection. Your attention decides which story becomes true and which story is lost. In moments of stress, the filter narrows even more. Think of a surgeon in an emergency or a pilot during turbulence. Their minds tunnel in on what feels most urgent, a single symptom, a single gauge, and yet that focus can also hide crucial information in the edges of awareness. This is why high-stakes professions train specifically to counter selective attention. Checklists, teamwork, verbal confirmations, they're not just routines. They're tools to expand awareness beyond the mind's natural tunnel vision. Because in those moments, the cost of what goes unseen can be everything. Technology amplifies this bias in quiet, invisible ways. Every ping, every notification, every flashing banner demands a sliver of your focus, leaving you juggling dozens of partial attentions rather than one deep one. You might find yourself scrolling through your phone, unaware of the sunset outside or the friend trying to speak beside you. In this modern world, selective attention has been stretched thin. No longer a spotlight, but a flickering lamp chasing every distraction. Yet, this bias isn't your enemy. It's a reminder of how precious your awareness truly is. You can train it, you can widen it. Start by noticing what you notice. When you find yourself judging, ask, what am I not seeing right now? When you make a decision, pause and wonder, which details did my attention leave behind? Even a moment of curiosity can pull hidden truths into focus. The mind evolved this way for survival. Our ancestors needed to spot movement in the grass, the shape of a predator, the shimmer of water in the distance. Those who could focus lived longer. But now, in a world of constant information, survival isn't about spotting threats. It's about seeing the whole picture. Recognizing your bias doesn't remove it, but it loosens its grip. It helps you listen more deeply, observe more clearly, and respond more wisely. Selective attention bias is the quiet artist painting your world, choosing what colors to use and which ones to leave blank. But tonight, as you sit here reflecting, maybe you can feel that artist's hand slow down. You can ask it to step back and reveal the entire canvas, to see not just what's loud or urgent, but what's subtle and true. The more you practice this awareness, the more reality expands, layer by layer, detail by detail, until the world feels more whole again. And so, before we drift toward the next illusion of perception, take one soft breath. Look around the room. Notice one thing you'd usually ignore: a sound, a color, a shadow, a tiny reflection. That small act, simple as it seems, is how awareness begins. If you're enjoying this calm journey through the mind's quiet tricks, I'd be grateful if you softly subscribed or left a gentle like. It helps this little space of curiosity reach others who might also be ready to slow down and see what they've been missing. Now let's drift toward the next illusion, one that hides not in what we focus on, but in what we fail to notice at all. Change blindness. Now, as your mind begins to settle deeper into this quiet reflection, let's explore something that hides in plain sight, not in the darkness, but in the flicker between what was and what is. It's the illusion of change blindness, the strange truth that even when your eyes are open, you might not see the world changing right in front of you. The human brain does not record reality like a camera. It does not capture every frame, every shift, every pixel. Instead, it sketches a rough image, a kind of mental painting that feels complete but is always missing pieces. When something in that painting changes too slowly, or outside the center of your focus, your brain quietly fills the gap. It tells you that nothing has changed, even when it has. You believe you're seeing everything, but in truth, you're seeing a story your brain writes moment by moment. Psychologists have tested this illusion in surprisingly simple ways. In one famous experiment, a person on the street stops a passerby to ask for directions. While they're talking, two men carry a large door between them, momentarily blocking the view. During that instant, the original person is replaced by someone entirely different. A new face, a new shirt, even a new voice. Yet many people continue the conversation without noticing the switch. Their brains, assuming continuity, simply filled in the blanks. It wasn't that their eyes failed. It was that their expectations overpowered their vision. This happens every day in quieter, subtler ways. You might look up from your phone at a traffic light and fail to notice that the car in front of you has already turned. Or you might glance at your desk and swear your keys were never moved, even though someone placed them there minutes ago. The truth is, your brain builds shortcuts to save energy. Once it believes it understands a scene, it stops checking for updates. It assumes stability. Change, unless dramatic, slips by unseen. Imagine standing in a room you know well. Your kitchen, your office, your bedroom. Everything feels familiar, predictable. Now picture someone swapping two small objects while you blink. A book moves to another shelf. A mug turns slightly. A photo tilts. You might walk through that room all day without noticing. Your brain doesn't reprocess every detail. It trusts its memory more than its eyes. It assumes everything is as I left it. This trust is what allows us to move fluidly through life, but it's also what makes us blind. Change blindness reveals that attention is not the same as vision. You can look directly at something and still fail to see it. Your mind edits constantly, blending new images into old ones until the seams disappear. It's why gradual changes, like a friend's growing beard or a fading paint color, seem invisible until the transformation is complete. When things change slowly, the brain treats each step as part of the same picture. You notice only when enough time has passed for the difference to shock you. This illusion can be harmless, even funny, but in some situations, it carries weight. In hospitals, a nurse might focus so intently on one vital sign that they miss another changing dangerously. In aviation, a pilot scanning a dashboard might overlook a subtle shift in an instrument reading because their focus is anchored elsewhere. These are not signs of carelessness. They are reflections of how human perception works, beautifully efficient yet deeply limited. To counter this, professionals build habits of double-checking, verbal confirmations, and structured scanning. Deliberate acts of awareness designed to widen the narrow beam of focus. Change blindness also affects relationships. People evolve, quietly, gradually, and yet we often fail to notice until something big happens. A friend becomes distant, a partner grows weary, a colleague's enthusiasm fades. These changes happen in slow motion, masked by familiarity. You look at them every day and think, they're the same, because your brain tells you so. Then one day, something shifts, a silence, a goodbye, and you finally see the transformation that's been unfolding for months. This illusion doesn't just hide physical change, it conceals emotional change too. Technology deepens the effect. We switch between screens, tabs, and messages so often that our perception fragments. We miss small shifts, a facial expression in a video call, a tone in a text, a subtle change in someone's words online. The human brain wasn't built for constant toggling. It was built for stillness, for noticing the slow rhythm of the world. In a world of constant updates, we ironically miss more than ever before. Even magicians rely on this bias. They understand that your eyes can't catch change if your mind doesn't expect it. While you focus on the flourish of one hand, the other hand performs the trick. The deception works not because you weren't looking, but because your brain decided what was important and quietly discarded the rest. Pickpockets, illusionists, stage performers, they all dance with your attention, guiding it like light through smoke. Think of a time you've lost something simple: your glasses, your phone, your wallet. You search the table again and again, certain it's gone. Then suddenly you find it sitting right in front of you. That small shock, the disbelief that something could hide in plain sight, that's change blindness in action. The brain's trust in its own model of reality momentarily breaks, and you glimpse just how much of the world it quietly edits out. The truth is, your awareness is a spotlight, not a floodlight. It shines where you direct it and leaves everything else in shadow. The world is vast, but your perception is narrow. And within that narrow beam, reality is rewritten every second. You see what your mind expects to see, not necessarily what's there. But there's a kind of peace in knowing this, because it means awareness can be cultivated. You can choose to expand the circle of light. Try it now. Look around your space slowly, not to find anything, but to notice the curve of a shadow on the wall, the small hum in the background, the temperature of the air on your skin. These are things your mind normally hides from you. But when you pause, when you bring stillness to the act of seeing, the hidden layers return. Awareness, like a muscle, strengthens with use. Change blindness is not a flaw, it's a function. It allows you to move through the complexity of life without being overwhelmed. But when left unchecked, it can make you a stranger to your own surroundings. Awareness begins by questioning that comfort, by asking, what might I be missing right now? And so, as we leave this illusion behind, let the thought linger gently. Perhaps the world is changing in every moment, and the only thing still is your assumption that it isn't. To notice the shift, to really notice, is to awaken. If this calm journey through perception has opened something quiet inside you, consider staying for what's next. Each illusion reveals another layer of the mind, subtle, beautiful, and often unseen. When you're ready, let's drift softly into the next one, the illusion where sight and awareness part ways entirely. Inattentional blindness. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're walking through a crowded street, scrolling through your phone, reading a message. Hundreds of sights move around you. People crossing, cars slowing, a child tugging at a balloon string. Yet all of that fades into nothing as you focus on the small glow in your hand. You walk through a world full of color, motion, and life, but you see only words on a screen. That is inattentional blindness. Not the failure to see, but the failure to notice what's already there. One of the most famous demonstrations of this illusion comes from psychology's invisible gorilla experiment. In this study, participants watched a video of two teams passing a basketball. They were told to count the number of passes made by the players wearing white shirts. Midway through the video, a person in a full gorilla suit calmly walked across the court, stopped in the middle, beat their chest, and then walked off. The moment was obvious, even humorous. And yet, when asked afterward, about half the viewers never saw the gorilla. Their eyes recorded the image, but their attention did not. The brain, you see, is a selective instrument. It cannot process everything, so it prioritizes what feels important. When your focus locks onto one task, everything else fades to grey. This is not laziness or ignorance. It's an elegant survival mechanism. Your mind treats focus like a precious resource, but that same mechanism that protects you from overload also blinds you to the unexpected. Everyday life is full of invisible gorillas. The coworker trying to get your attention while you're writing an email, the subtle traffic light that's changed while you're looking for an address, the tone in someone's voice that tells you they're not okay, even though their words say they are. Inattentional blindness hides in these moments, not as an absence of sight, but as a narrowing of the mind. Imagine a driver searching desperately for a street sign while turning a corner. Their eyes are open, their hands steady on the wheel, but their attention is tethered to the sign. A child steps into the crosswalk, visible and near, yet unseen. The eyes do not betray us, and our focus does. This is why distraction is so dangerous. Attention is not infinite. Every time it is captured by one thing, it abandons another. The same principle appears in hospitals, classrooms, even relationships. A nurse might focus entirely on an IV drip, missing the subtle change in a patient's breathing. A teacher grading essays might fail to notice the quiet sadness in a student's face. A friend might listen to your words but miss the silence that hides behind them. Inattentional blindness doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about intelligence, training, or love. It happens to everyone, because everyone has limits to what they can hold in awareness. Magicians have known this for centuries. They draw your gaze to one hand while the other performs the trick. You follow their movement, their story, their voice. And while your focus narrows, the secret unfolds unseen. Pickpockets too exploit this bias. They tap your shoulder or ask a question, guiding your attention away from your pocket just long enough to make something vanish. It feels impossible until you remember how the brain truly works. Not as a camera, but as a curator. Even in our digital lives, inattentional blindness quietly expands. Notifications, pings, messages, pop-ups, each one steals a fraction of focus. When you switch rapidly between them, attention splinters. You may feel like you're multitasking, but what's really happening is a rapid switching, a dance of half seeing and half listening. The result is that you miss the depth of everything. You scroll but do not absorb. You hear but do not listen. You look but do not see. The illusion extends to memory too. You cannot remember what you never noticed. If something passes unnoticed, it leaves no trace to recall later. That's why eyewitnesses can be so certain and so wrong. They believe they saw everything, but what they really saw was a small slice of the scene, carved by their attention at that moment. Later, when they try to remember, their mind fills in the missing pieces with imagination, confident but false. The power of inattentional blindness lies not in its rarity, but in its constancy. It is always there, shaping what enters your awareness and what slips by. Yet within this limitation lies a quiet lesson. To see more, you must slow down. Awareness expands in stillness. When you stop rushing, when you pause long enough to really observe, the hidden details begin to appear. Try this experiment now. As you listen, shift your focus to your surroundings. Notice one sound you hadn't heard before, maybe a faint hum, or a soft ticking, or your own breathing. Then, without moving, shift your attention again to the feeling of your feet on the floor, the weight of your hands, the rhythm of your pulse. The world becomes fuller, richer, layered with sensations that were always there but hidden in the shadow of focus. That is what it means to awaken your awareness. Inattentional blindness reminds us that presence is not about sight, it's about attention. You can walk through a beautiful sunset and see nothing if your mind is elsewhere. You can sit beside someone you love and not feel their sadness if your focus is on your own thoughts. The eyes may be open, but perception requires participation. In truth, this illusion is both humbling and hopeful. Humbling because it shows how fragile perception is, how easily the mind can overlook the obvious. Hopeful because awareness can be trained. The act of noticing can become a habit, a gentle discipline, to slow down, to breathe, to look again. This is how we see what we once missed. So tonight, or whenever you find yourself lost in the noise of tasks and screens, pause for a heartbeat. Ask quietly, what am I not seeing right now? That question alone is a light. And sometimes it's enough to make the invisible visible again. The Müller-Lyer illusion. Take a moment to picture two straight lines. Each one is exactly the same length. You know that, because I've told you. And yet, as you look, something inside you whispers that one is longer than the other. At each end of the first line, the arrow points outward, like the sharp corners of a roof. At each end of the second, the arrow points inward, like the open corners of a hallway receding in space. This is the Müller-Lyer illusion, one of psychology's most enduring mysteries. A quiet trick that turns geometry into perception, and perception into belief. The illusion was first described in the 19th century by Franz Karl Müller-Lyer, a German sociologist who noticed how simple shapes could deceive even the most rational mind. He realized that our sense of distance and depth could bend what we see without changing what is there. When the arrows point outward, the line seems to stretch, as if its ends are reaching toward you. When the arrows point inward, the line seems to retreat into the page, as though vanishing into depth, but the lines are identical. The trick lies not in the ink or the angle, but in the assumptions your brain quietly makes about space. Why does this happen? Because your mind evolved in a three-dimensional world, not a flat one. For millions of years, the brain has learned to interpret patterns of light as clues about distance and structure. Corners, shadows, converging lines, all of them tell you whether something is near or far. So when you see those arrow tips, your mind doesn't read them as decoration. It reads them as perspective. It imagines depth where none exists. The outward-pointing arrows feel like the corners of a building facing you. The inward-pointing ones resemble the interior of a room stretching away. And in that moment, your sense of length is warped by your sense of space. This illusion reveals something profound. Seeing is an act of interpretation, not recording. Your eyes gather raw data, but your brain edits, predicts, and completes the picture long before you're conscious of it. What feels like seeing reality is actually your mind's best guess, built on past experiences, expectations, and shortcuts. That's why even when you measure the lines and confirm they're equal, the illusion doesn't disappear. Knowledge can't undo instinct. Your visual system keeps whispering its old story, because those shortcuts run deeper than logic. In daily life, the Müller-Lyer effect appears in subtle ways. A hallway may look longer than it is because of converging lines. A skyscraper might appear taller when viewed from a street corner that tapers upward. Designers and architects often use these cues intentionally, stretching ceilings, widening rooms, creating depth with shadow and alignment. Our sense of proportion is malleable, and the world around us quietly takes advantage of it. Think about how this plays out in communication too. Sometimes, two statements can be identical in meaning, yet feel completely different because of framing, the verbal equivalent of those arrowheads. One sentence can make an idea seem grand and expansive, another can make it seem confined or doubtful. Just as our eyes misjudge lines, our minds misjudge words, influenced by subtle cues of tone, context, and emotion. Every conversation, every argument, every decision is shaped by the invisible geometry of perspective. The illusion also invites a gentler insight, humility. If something so simple as a pair of lines can fool even trained scientists, what else might we misunderstand about the world? Our certainty becomes softer when we realize perception is a partnership between what is out there and what is in here. When you argue, when you judge, when you insist that you see it clearly, remember that your vision, literal or metaphorical, may still carry its own set of inward and outward arrows. Artists have long played with this phenomenon. Painters use converging lines to draw the eye toward depth. Photographers use framing to make a flat image breathe with space. Even cinematographers craft entire moods by manipulating perspective. Wide lenses that exaggerate distance, narrow ones that compress it. They know what Müller-Lyer showed more than a century ago. Perception is not passive. It is creative. Your brain does not simply see, it builds. And just as you can be deceived by two simple lines, you can be misled by your interpretations of people, experiences, and memories. Sometimes what feels distant is only drawn that way by the angles of your attention. Sometimes what feels large is only a trick of perspective. Awareness of that truth can soften the edges of frustration and judgment. You begin to realize that the world, like those lines, changes shape when you change the way you look at it. Take a quiet moment now. Picture those two lines again. One with inward arrows, one with outward. See them equalize in your mind. Let your awareness rest not on what seems longer, but on the space between them, the still center where illusion fades. In that space, perception becomes reflection, and reflection slowly becomes clarity. The Müller-Lyer illusion teaches that even the simplest shapes can hide complexity. and that truth is often found not by looking harder, but by understanding how we look. Reality is constant. It is our interpretation that bends. To see clearly, we must remember that every line our mind draws can also deceive. And perhaps that's the quiet gift of all illusions. They remind us that certainty is easy, but awareness is deeper. Color constancy effect. Imagine holding a red apple in your hand. You walk from a bright garden into a dimly lit kitchen, and though the light around you changes, the apple still appears red. You might not even think about it. Your brain simply assures you that the color hasn't changed. Yet, if you measured the actual wavelengths of light reflecting off that apple, you'd discover something startling. Under the dim kitchen light, the physical color reaching your eyes is completely different, and still your mind insists it's red. That quiet insistence is known as the color constancy effect, a remarkable illusion that keeps your world stable, even when the light itself is in constant motion. Our visual system evolved to interpret meaning, not raw data. The eyes detect color through the wavelengths of light that bounce off surfaces, but your brain doesn't report those wavelengths directly. Instead, it calculates context. It compares how each object reflects light relative to its surroundings. If a shadow falls across a white wall, the wall doesn't suddenly appear grey. Your brain compensates. It understands that light has changed, not the wall itself. This ability allows us to recognize objects and environments consistently, an extraordinary trick of adaptation that we take for granted. But this same gift can also deceive us. Color constancy is the reason two people can look at the same object under different lighting and disagree on what color it is, and both be right in their own context. You might remember the viral photograph of a dress that appeared blue and black to some, and white and gold to others. The image exposed the human mind's quiet calculations of light and shade. One group's brains assumed the dress was in shadow and compensated toward blue and black. The other assumed bright daylight and compensated toward white and gold. Neither side was lying. They were simply experiencing different interpretations of the same visual input. Reality itself hadn't changed. Only the brain's correction of it had. This effect serves a purpose: stability. Without color constancy, the world would shift in chaos every time a cloud passed overhead. The grass would flicker between green and brown. Your skin tone would fluctuate as sunlight faded. You'd lose trust in what you see. So, your brain builds a color memory, a kind of internal consistency map that ensures objects remain recognizable. It sacrifices objective truth for a comforting illusion of continuity. Artists and photographers understand this instinctively. They know that the color we perceive depends on light, shadow, and contrast. Painters use this to their advantage, adding warmth where the viewer's eye expects light, or cooling a shadow to make a scene feel more alive. Even cinematographers rely on this illusion, shifting color tones to evoke emotion. A golden hue can make a moment feel nostalgic or safe. A blue tone can whisper loneliness or calm. We respond emotionally to light because our brains are wired to link color with meaning. There's a quiet metaphor hidden inside this illusion. Just as the brain corrects colors to maintain constancy, we correct our experiences to maintain emotional balance. When something changes around us, a person, a place, a truth, our mind tries to stabilize it, to make it feel familiar. We cling to the idea that things are as they were, even when they're not. That same mechanism that keeps an apple red in the dark can make us blind to the ways our world has shifted. We hold on to old interpretations long after the light has changed. Think of how often this happens in relationships. Someone grows distant, their energy shifts, yet you keep seeing them as you once did. Your emotional constancy holds the image steady, painting warmth where the light has dimmed. Or perhaps a dream that once inspired you now weighs you down. But you keep coloring it with old meaning, because your mind prefers the comfort of what's known to the discomfort of new perception. Color constancy, in that sense, is both a gift and a quiet chain. In science, this phenomenon has fascinated researchers for decades. They've studied how the brain uses information from shadows, reflections, and even memory to guess an object's true color. It's not a single calculation. It's a symphony of comparisons, context, and expectation. The mind doesn't just see color. It interprets color based on everything it knows about light. Even when placed in artificially lit environments or virtual spaces, people's brains continue to apply the same ancient rules, trying to make sense of brightness, tone, and shadow as if they were under the sun. It shows how deep these perceptual systems run. built over millions of years of evolution to protect us from confusion. In a way, the color constancy effect is the mind's quiet promise. I'll keep the world steady for you. But sometimes, in its effort to protect us, it also prevents us from seeing when the world has truly changed. We don't always notice when the light has shifted, when what once was true is no longer so. And so, awareness becomes the art of seeing both the apple and the light that reveals it, to recognize not just color, but the conditions that shape it. If you look around your own room right now, notice the soft gradients of shadow. The color of your walls isn't one fixed hue. It's a living range that changes with the light. The same is true for life itself. It's never static, never singular. Every moment, every feeling, every truth depends on the light of awareness you bring to it. Change the light, and you change the meaning. So perhaps the lesson of this illusion isn't about deception at all. It's about gratitude. Your brain works tirelessly to make sense of chaos, to maintain balance, to protect you from instability. And yet, the more you understand how it edits reality, the more you can appreciate both the illusion and the truth beneath it. The world isn't always what it seems, but in that imperfection lies its beauty. Auditory illusions. Close your eyes for a moment and listen, not just to what's outside, but to what your mind expects to hear. Perhaps you notice the hum of a fan, the faint rhythm of distant traffic, the subtle echo of your own breathing. But even as you listen, you might not realize that what you hear is not always what truly exists. Sound, like sight, is filtered through expectation. Your ears capture vibrations, waves in the air, but your brain transforms those waves into meaning. And in doing so, it bends, edits, and sometimes invents. This is the strange beauty of auditory illusions, where the mind hears what isn't there, or shapes what is there into something it can understand. Think of the first time you heard your name in a crowd. Dozens of voices blending together, but that one sound, your name, somehow cuts through the noise. Your brain, without your conscious permission, lifts it from the chaos and makes it clear. It isn't that the sound was louder, it's that it was important. Your mind is a storyteller, always searching for patterns, always assigning meaning. It amplifies what matters and erases what doesn't. That same mechanism, however, can create illusions, moments when you hear something that isn't real at all. One famous example is the Yanny or Laurel phenomenon, a short audio clip that divided the internet. Half the listeners swore they heard the word Yanny, while the other half insisted it was Laurel. Both groups were right, in a way. The sound contained frequencies that could be interpreted as either, depending on the listener's ear sensitivity, age, and even what word they expected to hear. Your mind doesn't just receive sound, it predicts it. And once it predicts, it fills in the blanks. Expectation becomes perception. The same principle appears in the phantom words illusion, discovered by psychologist Diana Deutsch. In this experiment, 2 different sequences of random syllables are played in each ear. After a few seconds, listeners begin to hear words and phrases emerging from the noise, phrases that aren't actually there. Each person hears something different. One might hear, "I'm okay," another, "Where are you?" another, "No way." Their brains, desperate to find order in randomness, weave coherence out of chaos. In a sense, every listener becomes a composer, creating meaning where none exists. Auditory illusions reveal how deeply the mind participates in hearing. We like to think of sound as external, objective, a vibration that enters the ear and becomes a signal. But hearing is far more intimate than that. Your brain doesn't simply translate vibrations, it interprets them. It filters out noise, enhances rhythm, predicts what comes next. That's why you can hear a melody continue in your mind after it stops. Your brain's prediction loop keeps the pattern alive. And it's also why a song can get stuck in your head for hours. The auditory cortex loves closure. It wants to complete the unfinished tune. One of the most fascinating auditory illusions is the shepherd tone, a sound that seems to rise endlessly in pitch, but never actually does. It's created by layering tones an octave apart, each fading as another begins. Your brain, tricked by the smooth transition, perceives an infinite climb, a staircase of sound that never reaches the top. Filmmakers use it to create tension, that uneasy sense that something is building but never resolving. Christopher Nolan used it in Dunkirk and The Dark Knight, the soundtrack rising, 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 and yet never releasing. It keeps you on edge, trapped in a loop of anticipation your mind cannot escape. This illusion mirrors a deeper human truth. We often live in shepherd tones of our own making, chasing goals, climbing ladders, always feeling like we're rising but never arriving. Our minds create the illusion of almost there, keeping us engaged, restless, alert. It's an auditory metaphor for ambition, for time, for the endless hum of modern life. And just like the shepherd tone, it never resolves, unless you choose to step away and listen differently. Then there's the McGurk effect, a fascinating dance between sound and sight. When you see someone's lips form one syllable but hear another, your brain fuses them, creating a third, completely new sound. For instance, when the sound bar is paired with the visual of lips saying far, most people hear far. Your brain trusts its eyes more than its ears. It constructs a compromise between the senses, preferring coherence over accuracy. This effect proves something quietly astonishing. What you hear is influenced by what you see. Perception isn't a single sense. It's a negotiation between all of them. In the world of nature, auditory illusions are everywhere too. Think of the echoing call of a bird bouncing off the trees, sometimes sounding close, sometimes far, or the ocean waves blending with wind, creating rhythms that seem almost musical. Your mind finds patterns in randomness because patterns make you feel safe. To hear a rhythm is to believe in predictability. That's why even white noise can feel soothing. Your brain recognizes the texture of constancy and relaxes into it. Music itself thrives on illusion. A skilled composer knows how to play with your brain's expectations, setting up patterns, breaking them, resolving them just enough to keep you listening. Dissonance, harmony, tempo, and silence all rely on how your mind predicts sound. The pleasure of music isn't just in the notes. It's in the dance between what happens and what you think will happen next. Every drop, every pause, every crescendo is a manipulation of anticipation. You are not merely hearing music, you are participating in its creation. Even language depends on this collaboration. When someone speaks, you don't process every syllable. You predict based on rhythm and context. That's why you can still understand a sentence spoken in noise or read a paragraph with missing letters. Your brain fills in what's missing, just as it does in the auditory world, and sometimes it fills in too much, hearing insults where none were meant, or kindness that wasn't there. Perception is both a gift and a projection. Auditory illusions remind us how subjective the experience of sound really is. What you hear reflects not only your environment but your history, your culture, your emotions, your memories. A song that soothes one person might sadden another because sound travels not just through air but through meaning. The same melody that once lifted you might ache now because your heart has changed. Every sound, every silence carries the echo of who you are when you hear it. So as you sit here now in quiet reflection, notice the layers of your listening. There's the sound in the room, soft, distant, real. There's the sound in your memory, a voice, a song, a whisper. And there's the sound in your imagination, the one your mind invents to fill the silence. All of them blend into what feels like hearing. And yet, most of it happens inside you. Perhaps that's the true meaning of auditory illusion. Not that our ears deceive us, but that sound is never only outside. It's a collaboration between the outer world and the inner one. To listen deeply is to hear not only what's present, but what your mind adds, subtracts, and transforms. When you become aware of that, listening becomes meditation, an act of noticing how perception and imagination hold hands. So tonight, if you find yourself surrounded by quiet, lean into it. Notice how silence isn't empty. It hums with the residue of every sound you've ever heard, every echo, every memory, every imagined note, and perhaps somewhere within that stillness, you'll hear the faint music of awareness itself, constant, calm, endlessly unfolding. Time perception. Distortion. Have you ever noticed how time can stretch and shrink depending on the moment? An hour spent waiting feels endless, while an entire afternoon lost in joy can vanish in what feels like seconds. We talk about time as if it were constant, ticking evenly, second by second. But your mind experiences it differently. It bends and folds time like light through glass. This strange, elastic quality of experience is known as time perception distortion. The illusion that time itself changes when, in truth, only our awareness of it does. Your brain doesn't actually measure time like a clock. It reconstructs it, moment by moment, from patterns of attention, emotion, and memory. When you're deeply focused, time compresses. When you're anxious or bored, it expands. Think about being stuck in traffic. The minutes crawl, each one heavy and stubborn. Now think about spending the same amount of time with someone you love, lost in laughter. The same 60 minutes vanish like breath on glass. Time didn't change. Your state of mind did. Scientists have long studied this mysterious phenomenon. Our internal clock is not a single mechanism, but a network of brain regions, the prefrontal cortex, basal ganglia, cerebellum, and insula, all working together to estimate duration. But they don't tick evenly. They respond to emotion, arousal, and novelty. When your heart rate rises or your senses sharpen, your brain processes more information per second. More data makes moments feel longer. That's why, during an accident or near-death experience, people often say, time slowed down. In truth, their perception accelerated. Their brain recorded so much detail that the moment stretched. There's another side to this. Familiarity shortens time. When your days follow the same routine, same route to work, same conversations, same screens, your brain compresses them. It stops paying close attention, saving energy by skipping the details. That's why childhood summers feel endless, while adult years slip by in blinks. As children, everything is new. The taste of rain, the smell of a classroom, the discovery of how shadows move. Novelty forces attention, and attention expands time. As adults, we stop noticing. The more familiar life becomes, the faster it seems to go. Psychologists call this the holiday paradox. When you're on vacation, days feel long, each one filled with new experiences, tastes, and sights. But when you return home and look back, it feels as if the trip was over too soon. During the experience, novelty stretches time. In memory, it compresses. The brain keeps two clocks, one for the present, one for the past, and they rarely agree. Time perception also bends with emotion. Fear lengthens it, joy shortens it. Sadness slows it down in an aching way, not through intensity, but through weight. Anticipation makes it inconsistent. You can feel both impatient and hopeful at once, suspended between seconds that don't seem to move. Our relationship with time is emotional, not mechanical. That's why it's so difficult to live in the moment, because the moment is elastic, shaped by what we feel. Even the body plays a role. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your internal rhythms all feed the sense of time passing. When you're calm, your pulse slows, and the world feels steady. When you're under stress, your heart races, and so does your perception of time. The faster your body moves, the more moments you experience. It's as if your mind is sampling reality more frequently, stretching each instant wider. But when you relax, those samples slow down, and time collapses into stillness. Think of music. The rhythm, the pauses, the tempo. A single song can make time behave differently. Slow, ambient music can lull minutes into feeling longer. Fast, pulsing beats can make them rush by. Filmmakers use this intentionally. A lingering piano note in a quiet scene can feel eternal. A rapid montage of movement can make hours pass in a heartbeat. Our sense of time, like sound and color, is something we feel rather than measure. This illusion has deep implications for how we live. If time feels faster as life becomes repetitive, then awareness, deliberate noticing, is the antidote. When you slow down and pay attention, even ordinary moments stretch open. The texture of your coffee, the flicker of light through curtains, the faint rhythm of your breath, they all become tiny anchors pulling you back into the present. The moment expands because you are in it. Mindfulness, then, isn't just a spiritual concept. It's a neurological recalibration of time itself. Time perception distortion also reveals why memory and emotion are intertwined. When something intense happens, joy, grief, fear, your brain encodes more sensory information. That's why you remember exactly where you were during significant events, or why heartbreak feels like it lasts forever. Your brain recorded every heartbeat, every flicker of thought, and replaying those memories reactivates the distortion. You don't just remember the moment, you relive its altered time. This illusion can even be therapeutic. When people meditate, they often report that time disappears altogether. Minutes dissolve into a gentle timelessness, where awareness expands, but the clock seems to stop. It's not that time has vanished. It's that the mind has stepped out of measurement mode. It no longer divides experience into before and after, fast or slow. It simply is. That timeless awareness, even if brief, resets the nervous system. It reminds us that while the world measures time, consciousness simply flows. There's another curious aspect of time distortion: anticipation. The more you look forward to something, the slower time seems to pass before it arrives. But once it's here, it's over in a blink. This is because anticipation heightens attention. You count every minute. But during the event, attention turns outward. You stop measuring and start living. It's a quiet irony. When we wait, time drags. When we live, it flies. The secret may be not to chase time, but to lose yourself in it. Technology, too, shapes our sense of time. Constant scrolling creates micro-distortions. Endless, short bursts of novelty that trick the brain into feeling busy while compressing memory. You look at your phone for a few minutes and realize an hour has passed. That's because fragmented attention prevents deep encoding. If memory is the map of time, then distraction erases the landmarks. Without memorable moments, time collapses into a blur. The paradox of modern life is that we save time, yet feel we have less of it. Automation, instant communication, on-demand everything, yet the days feel shorter. That's not because the clock is faster, but because attention is thinner. The less present we are, the less time we truly experience. Moments lose their depth when they're half-lived, and so the illusion of time becomes a mirror for the illusion of control. We chase productivity, thinking we're managing time, when what we're really managing is attention. To slow down time, you must reclaim awareness. To stretch a day, you must fill it with presence. The mind bends time not to trick you, but to remind you that time is perception, not possession. So tonight, as you listen, notice how even now the seconds feel softer. Slower, perhaps. That's because attention has turned inward. You're not rushing to the next moment. You're resting in this one. And in that rest, time unfolds gently, endlessly, quietly. Perhaps that's the truest understanding of all. Time is not something we move through. It's something that moves through us, shaped, stretched, and softened by awareness. And every time you stop to notice it, the illusion fades, and what remains is presence itself. Confirmation, bias. There's a quiet moment in every argument, a pause where both people stop listening and start waiting to speak. It's in that pause that one of the mind's most powerful illusions lives, the illusion that our beliefs are reflections of truth rather than choices of focus. It's called confirmation bias, and it shapes almost everything we think we know. Imagine walking into a room with two windows. Through one, you see sunlight spilling over calm waters. Through the other, dark clouds gathering in the distance. Both views exist, but you keep returning to the one that fits your mood, the one that confirms what you already feel. That's what the mind does every day. It selects evidence that agrees with its beliefs and quietly ignores the rest. You think you're collecting facts, but you're really collecting affirmations. This bias begins deep in the brain's structure, in areas tied to survival and emotion. The human mind evolved to seek coherence, not accuracy. It's safer to hold a consistent view of the world, even if it's incomplete, than to constantly question everything you see. Doubt takes energy. Certainty feels like safety, so the brain reinforces what it already believes. When we encounter information that aligns with our views, reward centers activate, tiny pulses of dopamine confirming that we're right. When something contradicts us, the brain reacts defensively, as though facing a threat. Logic becomes emotion. Disagreement feels like danger. You can see this everywhere. In conversations, politics, religion, relationships, even the smallest personal habits. We surround ourselves with people, media, and ideas that reflect our beliefs back at us. Our digital worlds amplify this even further. Algorithms quietly learn what we like, then show us more of it. Each click builds a cage of agreement, comforting, familiar, and invisible. It feels like the whole world agrees, but in truth, it's a mirror hall of our own preferences. That's confirmation bias at scale, the illusion of truth built from repetition. It's not only about ideology, it touches how we see ourselves too. When we succeed, we credit our talent. When we fail, we blame circumstances. We notice signs that support our self-image and filter out those that don't. Someone compliments us. We remember it vividly. Someone criticizes us. We dismiss it, call it misunderstanding. The brain protects the ego the same way it protects belief. To question either feels like cracking the shell that keeps our identity intact. Confirmation bias is the reason two people can watch the same event and walk away with completely different memories of it. It's why arguments rarely change minds. Because listening often isn't about learning. It's about waiting for proof you're already right. It's why we read headlines that affirm our opinions. Why we trust sources that sound like us. Why we interpret silence as agreement when it isn't. Every brain edits its own version of truth. This illusion is subtle because it feels like reason. When you find evidence that supports your view, it feels like thinking critically. But the truth is, the brain is filtering long before reason even begins. It selects what to notice and what to forget. It's not lying, it's protecting coherence. If every belief were questioned every moment, we'd drown in uncertainty. So instead, the mind builds shortcuts, small convictions that become anchors. Those anchors keep us steady, but they also keep us still. Even science, the pursuit of objectivity, wrestles with this bias. Researchers must constantly guard against only publishing studies that confirm their hypotheses. Peer review exists not because scientists are immune to bias, but because they aren't. The entire structure of critical thinking, debate, replication, open data, was designed to protect truth from our tendency to bend it. But even then, bias slips through. Data can be selected, interpretations shaped, conclusions softened to fit the story we want to tell. We are not truth's discoverers so much as its interpreters, painting within the lines our minds can accept. Confirmation bias affects how we love, too. When you trust someone, you notice every gesture that confirms their kindness. When you doubt them, you find proof of betrayal in even the smallest silence. The person hasn't changed, your focus has. And because attention is creative, what you look for, you will find. If you expect rejection, you'll see coldness in neutrality. If you expect warmth, you'll see care in small acts. The eyes follow belief, and belief shapes sight. This illusion also thrives in memory. We don't store moments as they were, we store interpretations. Later, when we recall them, the mind subtly rewrites to fit our current understanding. You might remember yourself as stronger, wiser, kinder than you were. Or the opposite, if your current self feels unworthy. Memory, like perception, obeys bias. It edits to maintain consistency between who you were and who you think you are now. But there's a gentle freedom in seeing this illusion clearly, because once you understand how the mind filters, you can begin to watch it filter. You can notice when you scroll past an article too quickly because it disagrees. You can pause when someone challenges your view and feel the subtle tightening in your chest. You can catch yourself choosing comfort over curiosity. And in that pause, in that microsecond of awareness, lies awakening. The illusion loses some of its power. Awareness doesn't remove confirmation bias, but it softens it. It turns defensiveness into dialogue, rigidity into reflection. It allows you to say, maybe there's more to this than I see. It opens the door to empathy, because if your own perception can bend so easily, so can anyone's. Understanding that humbles judgment and nurtures patience. The more you know about how your mind edits reality, the gentler you become with others, caught in their own edits. There's a practice in mindfulness called beginner's mind. It means meeting each experience as if for the first time, not as you expect it to be, but as it is. When you approach life this way, confirmation bias loosens. You stop trying to confirm and start trying to see. You listen to understand, not to win. You realize that truth doesn't need defense. It needs discovery. The illusion of confirmation bias is not evil. It's protective. It shields the mind from chaos, keeps identity intact, and offers a sense of order. But growth often requires discomfort. The willingness to hold two opposing truths and let them wrestle in your awareness. You can believe and question simultaneously. You can stand firm and still stay open. That balance is where wisdom begins. Think about your day. How many of your thoughts, conversations, or reactions were shaped by what you wanted to be true? What would shift if you noticed those filters in real time? Not to blame yourself, but to gently widen your view. Imagine how your world might change if, instead of seeking confirmation, you sought curiosity. You might find that truth, like light, grows brighter when it's allowed to enter from more than one window. So next time you catch yourself saying, "I knew it," pause. Ask quietly, "Did I know it, or did I just want to?" That single question can turn illusion into insight. Because the moment you start questioning what feels certain, you begin to see not only the world more clearly, but yourself. Anchoring effect. Imagine walking into a store to buy a jacket. The first one you see costs $500. It's stylish, smooth, and expensive. Maybe too expensive. Then you see another jacket, marked down to $150. Suddenly it feels like a bargain. You buy it, convinced you've made a smart decision. But pause for a moment. What if the $500 jacket had never been there? Would the second one still feel like a deal? That quiet shift in your judgment, the way your mind compares new information to the first thing it encountered. That is the anchoring effect. The anchoring effect is one of the most subtle, yet powerful illusions of decision-making. It happens when the first piece of information you receive, the anchor, heavily influences everything that comes after, even when it's irrelevant. The first number, the first impression, the first idea. They all become silent reference points. You compare everything else to them, often without realizing it. And because the anchor comes first, it shapes your sense of reality. This bias was first studied by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, the pioneers of behavioral economics. They found that even random numbers could influence human judgment. In one experiment, participants spun a wheel rigged to stop at either 10 or 65. Then they were asked to guess what percentage of United Nations countries were in Africa. Those who saw the number 10 guessed around 25%. Those who saw 65 guessed nearly double. The wheel was meaningless, but it had planted a seed. The brain grabbed the first number it saw and used it as a silent anchor. Anchoring isn't limited to prices or numbers. It affects how we judge people, events, even ourselves. The first impression you form of someone acts as an anchor for everything that follows. If you meet a person when you're tired or distracted, that moment can quietly color your perception of them for years. If your first experience of a city is during rain and traffic, it may never feel welcoming, even on sunny days. The mind doesn't just remember first impressions, it builds from them. Our brains rely on anchors because they simplify complexity. The world is filled with uncertainty, and the mind craves reference points. Anchors act like shortcuts, helping us make quick estimates and decisions. But the problem is that these shortcuts often lead us astray. Once the anchor is set, even when we know it's arbitrary, we adjust too little away from it. It's as though the anchor holds the chain of our reasoning, keeping us from drifting too far. Think about a salary negotiation. Whoever names a number first usually sets the tone. Even if the amount seems unreasonable, the conversation revolves around that anchor. The other person's counteroffer will orbit it like a planet around a star. Real estate agents do the same with property prices, marketers with product discounts, politicians with statistics. The first number you hear isn't always the truth, but it becomes the truth you measure by. The anchoring effect also extends inward, shaping how you view your own worth. If your first job paid you a small amount, that figure might quietly define what you believe you deserve, even years later. If your first failure was harsh, it might anchor your sense of capability. You begin to compare future success to that original standard, a standard set not by truth, but by circumstance. Anchors can be external, but the ones we set for ourselves are the hardest to move. Emotion amplifies anchoring. When a number or idea is tied to a feeling, excitement, fear, pride, it embeds deeper. That's why marketing uses urgency and emotion together. Was $500, now $150. The discount isn't just math, it's psychology. The original number creates an emotional anchor that makes the lower one feel like a reward. The same trick appears in relationships and memory. Your first intense love can anchor how you define passion. Your first heartbreak can anchor what you think vulnerability feels like. Every first becomes a reference point for what follows. But anchoring isn't always negative. It can also be used consciously, intentionally, to reframe your perception. You can set new anchors for behavior, for mindset, for what you expect of yourself. When you wake up in the morning and remind yourself of one clear goal or one positive thought, that becomes the day's anchor. Every moment after adjusts around it. When you start a conversation with kindness, the rest of it softens naturally. Anchors can deceive, but they can also direct. Awareness transforms them from traps into tools. Consider how time anchors perception as well. The first moment of your day, the tone of your morning, often dictates how you experience the hours ahead. If you begin rushed, the day feels short. If you begin slow and intentional, the same hours feel fuller. Your first few minutes act as anchors, stretching or compressing everything that follows. Even memories are anchored in time. A single powerful moment can define a whole chapter of your life, making the rest fade around it. You remember the beginning vividly because it sets the meaning for what comes after. In decision-making, awareness of the anchoring effect is one of the most powerful forms of freedom. When you notice yourself judging something too quickly, pause and ask, what am I comparing this to? The moment you identify your anchor, it begins to lose its pull. You can step back and see the situation as it is, not as it appears through the shadow of the first impression. Anchoring thrives in unconsciousness. Awareness, gentle and deliberate, breaks its spell. The illusion of anchoring mirrors the illusion of certainty. Both begin with something small, a number, a story, an experience, that grows into a frame for everything else. The mind clings to it because letting go feels like losing ground. But the truth is, anchors don't hold us steady. They often keep us from drifting into possibility. To unanchor yourself is to open to change, to allow reality to redefine itself beyond your first assumptions. Imagine if you lived without anchors for a moment, without the constant comparison to what was first. Each experience would stand on its own. Each person, each idea, each day would be new, unburdened by the ghosts of the past. That is clarity. Not the absence of memory, but the freedom from its gravitational pull. Anchoring reminds us that the first isn't always the truest. The first number isn't the real value. The first impression isn't the whole story. The first belief isn't the ultimate truth. To see beyond them, you must notice how they shape you. You must learn to ask, if this weren't my starting point, how would I decide? That question, quiet but powerful, loosens the invisible weight of the anchor. So as you listen now, perhaps take a soft breath and reflect. What anchors are guiding your judgments? Which assumptions do you carry without question? And what might happen if, just for today, you let one of them go, allowing the next moment to define itself freely? Because once you learn to release your anchors, you don't drift aimlessly. You simply start to sail, finally toward what's real. Availability heuristic. Picture this. You're sitting quietly at home, watching the evening news. You see stories about plane crashes, robberies, floods, and earthquakes. The images are vivid. Twisted metal, flashing sirens, people crying. You turn off the television and glance at the clock, but those images linger. Later that night, when someone asks how dangerous the world feels, you say, very. It's not that you've done the math, it's that you've felt it. That's the availability heuristic, the mind's tendency to judge probability, importance, or truth based on how easily examples come to mind. Our brains are storytellers, not statisticians. They favor vivid memory over accurate measurement. If something is easy to recall, dramatic, emotional, recent, it feels more common than it really is. And if something is quiet, abstract, or unseen, it feels rare, even when it happens constantly. It's why we fear plane crashes more than car accidents, even though the latter are far more frequent. It's why one frightening headline can make an entire world feel unsafe. The mind confuses availability with reality. The availability heuristic is one of the simplest yet most deceptive shortcuts of the brain. When you ask yourself a question, how risky is flying? Or how honest are people? Your mind doesn't consult data, it searches memory. Whatever comes up first becomes your answer. If you've recently seen a video of turbulence, flying feels dangerous. If you've just met someone kind, humanity feels warm. Memory availability becomes a lens through which reality is judged. But memory is not a mirror, it's a filter. Evolution shaped this bias for good reason. In ancient times, the ability to recall threats quickly could mean survival. If a certain plant once made you sick, remembering it vividly kept you safe. If you saw a predator near the river, your mind replayed that scene every time you approached water. The vividness of memory was a form of protection. But in the modern world, where information floods our senses, this same mechanism backfires. The brain still treats vividness as importance, even when what's vivid is just noise. Think of how news and social media use this bias. They highlight the exceptional, the shocking, the emotional, because what's memorable grabs attention. A rare tragedy can dominate your sense of reality because it's easier to picture than the quiet normality of everyday life. Millions of safe flights fade from memory, but one crash burns itself in your imagination for years. The mind weighs what's available, not what's accurate, and so perception drifts from truth. Even in personal life, this illusion quietly steers you. If you've recently failed at something, the memory of that failure sits near the surface, easily retrievable. So when you face a new challenge, It colors your confidence. Not because failure is inevitable, but because the memory of failure is accessible. Likewise, when success is fresh, optimism feels natural. We judge the future through the ease with which we recall the past. Memory availability shapes emotion, and emotion shapes decision. The availability heuristic doesn't only distort risk, it also distorts hope. When you hear frequent stories of success, of people building wealth, achieving fame, transforming their lives, those examples feel close, attainable. You might overestimate how likely such outcomes are for yourself. This is why motivational culture can inspire and deceive at once. It fills your mental library with vivid cases of triumph, making success feel statistically inevitable, when in truth, it's exceptional. The human mind is drawn to the dramatic, both good and bad, and treats the ordinary as invisible. Psychologists have tested this bias in countless ways. In one classic experiment, people were asked whether there were more words in English that start with the letter K or have K as the third letter. Most answered, start with K, because those words were easier to think of. Kite, king, kitchen. In reality, words with K as the third letter are twice as common. The truth was buried simply because it was harder to recall. Ease of memory outweighed accuracy. This same pattern appears in judgment, love, fear, and even self-worth. If the last few memories you have of yourself are of mistakes, you'll see yourself as flawed. If they're of kindness or accomplishment, you'll see yourself as capable. Who you believe you are depends not on your entire history, but on which parts of that history are easiest to remember. Availability sculpts identity. And because emotion makes memories more retrievable, your most charged experiences, good or bad, often define your self-image more than they should. Think of relationships. After an argument, it's easy to recall every small irritation, every hurtful word. Those memories flood the mind effortlessly. But when the conflict fades, it takes deliberate effort to recall the good, the laughter, the quiet moments of care, the ordinary peace. Negativity is more memorable because it feels more urgent. The mind prioritizes potential threats to connection. That's why love, at its deepest, requires memory management. The conscious act of remembering the good when the bad is easier to recall. The availability heuristic also influences how we interpret the world's future. When disasters dominate headlines, optimism feels naive. When technology or kindness trends, hope feels easy. Reality, however, is not swinging wildly between utopia and despair. Our attention is. Our emotional climate follows the media we consume because vividness dictates mood. To know this is not to reject the world, but to reclaim perspective. Awareness of this illusion doesn't remove it, but it slows it. When something feels true simply because it's easy to imagine, pause. Ask, is this memory representative or just recent? When fear arises from one vivid story, remind yourself of the millions of unseen counterexamples. When you assume a trend is universal because it fills your feed, remember that algorithms favor what's engaging, not what's balanced. Truth hides in the quiet. To find it, you must look where the noise isn't. The availability heuristic is why statistics rarely change minds, but stories do. We are emotional learners. One vivid anecdote can outweigh 1,000 data points. That's why social movements use storytelling, because hearts move faster than numbers. It's not manipulation, it's understanding human nature. The mind remembers the image, not the chart. We don't store percentages in our souls, we store feelings. But there's also beauty in this bias. Because if we can be so powerfully moved by negative stories, we can also be transformed by positive ones. If one vivid tragedy can make us fearful, one vivid act of compassion can make us brave. The same mechanism that amplifies fear can amplify love, empathy, and gratitude. You can consciously choose what memories to keep close, what examples to feed your imagination. Your sense of the world, dangerous or kind, hopeless or healing, depends on what you let your mind recall most easily. Try this for a moment. Think of the last time someone surprised you with kindness. A stranger holding a door, a friend sending a message, someone forgiving you when they didn't have to. Let that image expand. Now imagine if you remembered that as vividly as every frightening headline you've ever seen. What kind of world would you live in then? The same world, only illuminated differently, because perception, at its core, is a choice of light. The availability heuristic teaches us that what comes to mind first isn't always what matters most. The loudest memory isn't always the truest. To see clearly, You must learn to quiet the easy thoughts and listen for the hidden ones, the moments your brain forgets to show you. Awareness of this illusion doesn't make you less human. It makes you more awake. You begin to recognize that fear, hope, and judgment are not measures of reality. They are reflections of what's available in your mind. And by choosing carefully what you feed that mind, you quietly begin to reshape the world you live in. Framing effect. Picture this. You're standing in a grocery store staring at two labels on the same bottle of juice. One says 90% fat-free. The other says contains 10% fat. You know, logically, that both statements mean exactly the same thing. And yet one feels lighter, healthier, more positive. The other feels heavier, unappealing, even a little guilty. That subtle shift in emotion, born not from fact but from framing, is one of the mind's most quiet and persuasive illusions. This is the framing effect, the psychological phenomenon that changes how you perceive information depending on how it's presented. The human mind does not see truth in isolation. It sees truth through context, words, tone, perspective. These are the frames that shape your judgment. Change the frame, and the picture changes. Even when the facts remain identical, the story they tell can feel entirely different. Our decisions are not guided only by data, but by how that data feels when it reaches us. And feeling, not logic, often drives choice. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman first revealed this effect in the 1980s. In one of their studies, they presented participants with two ways to respond to a deadly disease outbreak. In the first scenario, the plan was described as saving 200 lives. In the second, it was framed as 400 people will die. The mathematical outcomes were identical, yet most people chose the first plan, even though it offered no greater benefit, because it sounded hopeful. When later presented with the same outcomes framed negatively, participants switched preferences. The conclusion was profound. Our choices depend not on what we're told, but on how it's told. Every day, the framing effect quietly guides you. Politicians use it when they describe taxes as relief or burden. Marketers use it when they call a sale limited time instead of temporary. Doctors use it when explaining treatment success rates instead of failure rates. Your reaction shifts depending on whether something is presented as a gain or a loss, an opportunity or a threat. The frame becomes the filter through which your emotions interpret reality. It doesn't stop at words. Images, colors, even silence can frame meaning. A news headline in bold red letters feels urgent, alarming. The same words in pale blue feel calm. A friend's pause before saying, "I'm fine," can frame the statement as truth or lie. Our minds are not neutral instruments. They are emotional translators, constantly interpreting subtle cues of framing to assign meaning. This illusion extends deep into relationships too. Imagine hearing, "You never listen," versus, "I wish you'd hear me more." One feels like an accusation, the other feels like an invitation. Same truth, different frame. The first provokes defense, the second invites connection. Framing determines not only how words are heard, but whether they reach the heart at all. Even love and conflict depend on how reality is presented. Think about how you frame your own life. When you say, "I have to go to work," it feels heavy, obligatory. When you say, "I get to go to work," it subtly shifts toward gratitude. The action doesn't change, only the framing does. Yet that small linguistic choice alters your emotional experience of the same event. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes mood. Your inner dialogue is a constant storyteller, framing every moment you live. In decision-making, the framing effect often determines how we perceive risk. People are more likely to take risks when outcomes are framed as avoiding losses rather than achieving gains. This is why messages like "don't miss out" are more effective than "get this now." Loss feels heavier than gain, so the brain pays more attention to negative frames. Marketers, negotiators, and leaders all use this principle, sometimes consciously, sometimes instinctively, to influence behavior. But the effect isn't limited to persuasion. It reaches into self-perception. How you frame your failures defines your growth. If you call them mistakes, they sting. If you call them lessons, they transform. The same event, two frames, two completely different inner worlds. Your mind is always writing captions beneath the images of your life. You may not control what happens, but you can control the frame you place around it. Even memory is subject to framing. The way you retell a story determines how you feel about it later. Describe a difficult time as the worst thing that happened to me, and it remains heavy. Reframe it as the thing that taught me resilience, and the same memory becomes a source of strength. We edit our lives through the language we choose. Narrative becomes identity. Frame something as tragedy, and it wounds. Frame it as transformation, and it heals. Cultural frames shape collective belief. A nation's history can be framed as conquest or liberation, progress or destruction, depending on who tells it. Religious ideas, social norms, even moral values are built on shared framing. The frame doesn't just decorate the truth, it defines it. That's why empathy, the ability to see through another's frame, is so rare and so powerful. To step into someone else's perspective is to see how their reality was built. Every argument, every misunderstanding, every division begins not with disagreement over facts, but over frames. In a quieter way, the framing effect touches self-talk, the language we whisper to ourselves in the privacy of thought. I'm behind in life. I'm learning at my own pace. Both describe the same situation, but create entirely different feelings. The first breeds shame and comparison. The second invites patience and growth. Your self-narration becomes your emotional landscape. Every thought is a frame, and each frame colors your perception of the next moment. Even silence has a frame. When someone doesn't reply to a message, you frame that silence. Maybe as rejection, maybe as busyness, maybe as peace. The frame changes your emotional response entirely. You live not by the facts of what happens, but by the story you attach to them. This realization can change everything. It can turn anxiety into awareness, resentment into understanding, fear into curiosity. Reality is neutral. It's the frame that adds tone. So how can you see through this illusion? Awareness begins by questioning the presentation. When you hear information, ask, how else could this be framed? When you feel emotional after a statement, pause and look at the structure of its message. Is it a gain or a loss, a warning or an invitation? This small shift turns reaction into reflection. You begin to separate the frame from the content, the story from the fact. And in that separation, clarity appears. Framing, at its heart, is the mind's attempt to make sense of ambiguity. The world is too complex to see all at once, so we choose angles, windows through which to view it. There's nothing wrong with having frames. The danger lies in believing they are the whole picture. The more aware you are of them, the more fluid your perception becomes. You can reframe anger into empathy, fear into preparation, loss into gratitude. It doesn't erase pain, but it gives it shape, and shape gives meaning. Take a slow breath now and imagine looking at your own life as a gallery of frames. Some are gilded with pride, others scratched by regret. Each holds a moment, a memory, a truth. Now imagine stepping back, seeing the entire wall at once. You realize that no single frame defines the whole. They coexist, forming a mosaic of perspective. Change the frame, and the entire picture shifts. You are not trapped by one view. You are the curator of many. The framing effect reminds us that perception is not about truth alone. It's about presentation. What you believe, what you feel, what you choose, all can change with a simple shift in wording, tone, or thought. Reality remains what it is, but meaning is made in the margins. And perhaps wisdom lies in learning to frame life not as happening to you, but through you. A series of moments shaped by the angle of awareness you bring to them. Negativity bias. Think back to your last perfect day. A day when everything went smoothly. Maybe the weather was gentle, your coffee was just right, people smiled, and small tasks flowed without friction. You felt light, calm, at ease. Now think about a different day, one when a stranger said something harsh, or a small mistake haunted your mind. Which one do you remember more vividly? Which one echoes louder in your memory? Most of us carry the answer quietly. The bad moment lingers longer. That's not weakness. That's the negativity bias, the brain's ancient habit of giving more weight to what's painful than what's pleasant. This bias is one of the oldest survival instincts written into the human mind. Our ancestors lived in a world full of danger, predators, hunger, storms, illness. To survive, they needed to pay close attention to threats. Missing one positive detail, a sunset, a sweet fruit, a kind gesture, had no cost. But missing one negative one, the rustle of a predator, the bitterness of poison, could mean death. Over thousands of generations, evolution carved into us a simple rule. Bad is stronger than good. It kept our ancestors alive. But in the modern world, it keeps our minds on edge. Today, we rarely face predators or famine, yet our brains still react to stress and criticism as if our survival were at stake. One rude comment can drown out a dozen kind ones. A single mistake can overshadow a week of progress. One disappointing moment can replay in your mind for days, while 100 small joys fade by morning. Negativity sticks because the brain treats it as urgent. It lights up more neural circuits, triggers stronger emotions, and imprints deeper memories. That's why even a mild insult feels louder than a gentle compliment. Your brain's job isn't to make you happy, it's to keep you alive. Scientists have studied this imbalance in countless ways. In one experiment, participants watched faces with different expressions while their brain activity was recorded. Angry faces triggered faster, stronger responses than happy ones, even when flashed for milliseconds, too quickly to be consciously seen. Negative images activated the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Positivity requires attention. Negativity demands none. It rushes in, uninvited, and takes up space. This bias shapes nearly every aspect of our daily lives. In relationships, it's why we remember arguments more vividly than peaceful conversations. It's why a single moment of criticism can make us forget years of love. In workplaces, it's why leaders must offer multiple compliments to balance one critique. Our emotional math is unfair. One negative equals 5 positives, sometimes more. We are wired to guard, not to glow. Social media intensifies this bias. Negative news spreads faster than positive news because it stirs emotion. Fear and outrage drive clicks. Calm rarely does. Platforms amplify what triggers engagement, and the brain engages more easily with threat. That's why headlines shout danger, crisis, and conflict. They don't always reflect the balance of the world. They reflect the balance of our biology. Our attention gravitates toward what could harm us, even when we know it distorts reality. Negativity bias also influences memory. Our minds store unpleasant events more deeply because they carry lessons. The brain assumes pain equals importance, something to avoid in the future. That's why you might remember an embarrassing moment from years ago in vivid detail, yet struggle to recall a compliment from last week. The emotional weight of shame cements memory, while comfort fades like mist. In that sense, every scar is a lesson the brain refuses to forget. Yet, while the negativity bias once protected us, it now often imprisons us. In a world where physical threats are rare, the brain still reacts to social rejection, failure, or criticism as if lions were near. A single cruel comment online can tighten your chest. An unpaid bill can keep you awake as though danger were breathing outside your door. The primitive alarm system still rings, only now it rings for thoughts. We live in an age of mental predators, not physical ones. The effects of this bias ripple into how we see ourselves. A person can receive 10 compliments and 1 critique, and remember only the critique. They'll replay it, analyze it, and let it shape their self-worth. Negativity bias feeds perfectionism, anxiety, and self-doubt because it magnifies flaws and minimizes achievements. It whispers, "You're not enough," even in the face of proof that you are. It narrows focus until all you see is the single dark brushstroke on an otherwise bright painting. But understanding this illusion gives you power. Awareness allows you to rebalance what evolution has tilted. It doesn't mean ignoring the negative, it means contextualizing it. When something bad happens, remind yourself, this feels bigger than it is because my brain is built to exaggerate threat. When you catch yourself replaying one mistake, pause and ask, what went right today that I've forgotten? You'll find that the good moments are still there. They're just quieter, waiting for attention. Practicing gratitude is not sentimental. It's neurological reprogramming. Each time you intentionally notice something good, a calm breath, a soft light, a kind word, you strengthen the brain's pathways for positivity. Over time, they begin to compete with the older, louder circuits of fear. The goal isn't to silence negativity, it's to balance it. To teach the brain that safety, kindness, and peace deserve as much attention as danger once did. The negativity bias also teaches compassion. When someone reacts sharply, criticizes, or withdraws, it may not be malice. It may be their bias at work. Their brain, like yours, is tuned to defend, not delight. Recognizing this can soften your response. You begin to see beyond behavior, into the ancient survival pattern beneath it. That understanding transforms frustration into empathy, both for others and yourself. Mindfulness is one of the simplest ways to interrupt this bias. When a negative thought appears, don't fight it. Observe it. Name it gently. This is worry. This is judgment. This is memory. By naming it, you shift from being inside the emotion to witnessing it. The thought loses its grip because attention is no longer trapped in its story. You become the observer rather than the reactor, and awareness begins to reclaim balance. You can also train your mind through what psychologists call positive counterbalancing. For every negative event you dwell on, consciously recall 3 positive ones. If you replay an argument, also replay a moment of connection. If you remember a failure, remember a success that followed. At first it feels forced, the mind resists, but with time, it becomes a habit. You are, in essence, rewiring your brain to see wholeness rather than imbalance. Even nature teaches this rhythm. Every storm clears the air. Every night births dawn. Yet the mind fixates on thunder more than sunrise. It's not blindness, it's biology. But awareness can expand perception until you see both. The fear and the calm, the darkness and the light. Only then do you realize that one gives meaning to the other. The negativity bias is not your fault. It is your inheritance. But inheritance can be transformed. You can thank the ancient brain for keeping you alive. Then gently teach it that you're safe now. That not every shadow hides danger. Not every silence hides rejection. Not every mistake means ruin. The world is not as threatening as the mind assumes. To remember that is to begin healing from evolution's oldest illusion. So next time you find yourself fixating on what went wrong, whisper softly, "My brain is protecting me." That sentence alone can open a small space, a pause between reaction and peace. And in that pause, gratitude has a chance to speak. Because the truth is, for every dark thought that lingers, there are 100 gentle moments waiting to be noticed, if only you let them stay a little longer. Halo effect. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. They walk into the room with an easy smile, well-dressed, confident, kind. Within moments, you think, they must be intelligent, they must be capable, they must be good. You don't have evidence, you have an impression. That single trait, charm, beauty, confidence, casts a soft light across everything else you perceive about them. It makes their other qualities seem brighter than they may actually be. This quiet mental shortcut is called the halo effect, one of the most powerful and deceptive illusions in human psychology. The halo effect happens when one positive quality of a person, brand, or idea shapes how we judge all the rest. If someone looks attractive, we're more likely to assume they're honest. If someone speaks confidently, we assume they're competent. If a product comes in beautiful packaging, we assume it's high quality. The brain takes one shining detail and uses it to light up the entire picture. It's not logic, it's emotion wearing logic's mask. This illusion was first described by psychologist Edward Thorndike in the early 20th century. He discovered that when military officers rated their soldiers, one strong trait, like physical appearance or discipline, often inflated their ratings in unrelated areas like intelligence or leadership. One good impression created a halo that colored everything else. The opposite is true as well. A single negative trait can darken perception entirely. That's the horn effect, the shadow twin of the halo. But the halo effect doesn't only live in military assessments or workplaces. It lives in every moment you meet, judge, or admire someone. It's the reason celebrities can sell products unrelated to their talent. It's why an elegant logo makes a brand feel trustworthy. It's why teachers often grade attractive or enthusiastic students more generously. The mind doesn't like complexity. It prefers harmony. So, when one part shines, it assumes the rest must shine too. Consider how this illusion affects attraction. When you find someone physically appealing, you tend to fill in the blanks with goodness. Imagining intelligence, kindness, humor, depth. You project the qualities you want to exist because the glow of beauty makes them seem possible. That's why early love often feels like magic. It's partly reality, partly halo. Over time, as the glow fades, you begin to see the full picture, the details hidden by light. Sometimes the truth disappoints, sometimes it deepens love, but it always reveals what the halo once hid. The halo effect also influences how we view authority. A confident voice, Polished speech or neat appearance can make ideas seem more credible. Politicians, influencers, and leaders understand this instinctively. They project the qualities that create trust: posture, tone, dress. Knowing those signals carry emotional weight. We don't always evaluate their arguments. We evaluate the feeling they give us. And once trust is established, it becomes self-reinforcing. The halo grows larger, sometimes large enough to hide deception. In advertising, the halo effect is everywhere. A sleek design makes a phone seem more powerful. A luxury store's scent and lighting make products seem worth their inflated prices. One pleasant sensory cue, music, texture, color, spills over into judgment of the entire experience. Even the name of a product can create a halo. Organic, premium, artisan, words that signal virtue, inviting you to feel good about what you buy. The mind, ever efficient, prefers shortcuts to scrutiny. In everyday life, this bias often shapes fairness without our awareness. When we see a child who's well-behaved, we may assume they're also intelligent. When we meet someone who speaks with an accent, we may assume something about their education or background. Whether accurate or not, the halo works both ways. It elevates some, it diminishes others. And in that distortion, we lose sight of individuality. We stop seeing people as mosaics of mixed qualities and start seeing them as one-colored portraits, glowing or shadowed. The halo effect also extends inward. How you see yourself can be haloed by emotion. If you succeed at one thing, you may feel capable at everything. If you fail once, you might label yourself as incapable entirely. The self-halo magnifies extremes, both pride and shame. It can make you overconfident or self-critical, depending on which trait dominates your awareness. True self-understanding comes when you can hold both light and shadow, recognizing that one success doesn't define you, and neither does one flaw. Psychologists have also found that context amplifies this illusion. If you see a person's kindness in a calm environment, it seems genuine. If you see it amid chaos, it seems heroic. The same action framed differently radiates different intensities of light. Your perception is not just about what you see, it's about where and when you see it. Even timing becomes part of the halo. The halo effect can also explain why nostalgia feels so pure. We remember the past through soft light, one good memory shining so brightly that it colors entire years. We forget the ordinary, the struggles, the doubts. We edit the past with affection, creating emotional halos around moments and people. That's why songs, scents, and photographs can feel like time travel. They reactivate the glow we once attached to a period of our lives. The halo turns memory into myth. Awareness of this bias is not meant to kill wonder. It's meant to deepen it. When you know your mind paints with halos, you start to see where the brushstrokes are. You begin to ask, do I admire this person for who they are or for how they make me feel? Do I trust this idea because it's true or because it's presented beautifully? These questions don't destroy admiration. They refine it. They help you separate glow from substance. The beauty of the halo effect is that it also reveals how powerful kindness can be. A single act of warmth, a moment of grace, can cast a halo that changes how someone sees you, or even how they see themselves. You can use this bias for good. By radiating genuine care, you invite others to see more goodness in the world. The illusion becomes medicine rather than manipulation. When light is shared with intention, it heals rather than deceives. In relationships, being aware of halos helps you love more realistically. When the early glow fades, you can choose to keep seeing the person, not just the projection. When flaws appear, they don't destroy the image, they complete it. Real love begins where the halo ends, because beyond illusion lies acceptance. And acceptance, unlike the halo, doesn't fade. So the next time you meet someone and feel instantly drawn to them, pause and breathe. Notice the light in which you're seeing them. Ask yourself what might be hidden in the glow. Not to find fault, but to find truth. Because the mind's halos are beautiful, but they are also veils. And behind every veil is a person far more complex, far more human than any single light can reveal. The halo effect reminds us that perception is never pure. We see not with eyes alone, but with hearts, memories, and emotions that bend the light of reality. To see clearly, you must learn to hold both admiration and awareness, to let people be imperfect, to let beauty coexist with flaw. That balance doesn't dull the world's glow, it makes it real. And in that reality, there's a deeper kind of beauty, one not made of illusion, but of understanding. Sunk cost fallacy. Picture yourself at a movie theater. You've bought a ticket, found your seat, and halfway through the film, you realize it's awful. The plot drags, the dialogue feels forced, and you're not enjoying it at all. Yet you stay until the end. Why? Because you've already paid for it. Walking out feels like losing something. That invisible tug, the pull to continue simply because you've already invested, is called the sunk cost fallacy. It's one of the most common traps in human reasoning. The sunk cost fallacy happens when you let past investments of time, money, energy, or emotion influence your present decisions, even when those investments can't be recovered. The ticket money is gone. The time already spent in a job, a relationship, a project, it cannot be reclaimed. Yet, the mind clings to it, whispering, "You've come this far. You can't give up now." It mistakes endurance for wisdom and attachment for progress. This illusion comes from the way our brains are wired to avoid loss. We fear the feeling of waste more than the reality of it. Walking away makes the loss visible. Staying hides it under the illusion of commitment. So we double down, staying in failing ventures, continuing painful relationships, or holding on to possessions that no longer serve us. We confuse letting go with giving up. But in truth, giving up on what drains you is not failure. It's clarity. The sunk cost fallacy shows up in every corner of life. It's the entrepreneur who keeps funding a business that no longer works. The student who continues studying a subject they hate because they've already spent 3 years on it. The couple who stays together long after the love has gone, saying, "We've been through too much to walk away now." It's the small decisions too. Finishing a terrible book, forcing yourself to attend an event you no longer want, eating food you don't enjoy simply because you paid for it. The mind attaches worth to effort, not outcome, and so we remain in cycles long after their season has passed. The root of this fallacy lies in our emotional memory. When we invest, we form a bond, not only with the goal, but with the story of that goal. We remember the hope that started it, the hours we poured into it, the parts of ourselves woven into its progress. Abandoning it feels like abandoning a piece of identity. We think, if I quit now, everything I did was for nothing. But that's not true. Every effort carries value. It teaches, refines, and builds. The lesson remains, even when the path ends. Psychologists have studied this bias in experiments and found that even when people know an investment is unrecoverable, they still let it affect their choices. In one study, participants were asked to imagine they'd spent money on 2 different vacation trips. One to a sunny beach, one to a snowy mountain. A storm ruins the beach trip, but the mountain trip is perfect. Yet most people still said they'd go to the beach, because that's where they spent more money. Logic would favor the better experience, but emotion clings to cost. The mind hates waste more than discomfort. The sunk cost fallacy thrives on guilt and fear. Guilt of wasted effort, fear of judgment. We don't want to look foolish for changing our minds. We don't want others to say, "All that for nothing." So we push forward, even when we know the road leads nowhere. We'd rather lose slowly than admit loss now. But in that stubbornness, we lose something greater: time, freedom, peace. You see this illusion everywhere in modern life. People stay in draining careers because of their degrees. Companies continue failing projects because of prior investment. Governments pour billions into outdated systems because admitting failure feels politically dangerous. The illusion grows stronger the more we invest, like a gambler chasing losses, convinced that one more bet will turn everything around. But the past does not dictate the future. It only asks to be acknowledged and released. There's a quiet wisdom in cutting losses. It takes courage to say, "That was my path once, but not anymore." To recognize that you've outgrown something is not waste, it's evolution. The hours, the money, the emotions, they served their purpose. They brought you to the point where you can finally see clearly. Clarity often looks like quitting, but in truth, it's transformation. The person who began the journey isn't the same one standing here now. To cling to old investments is to serve a version of yourself that no longer exists. This fallacy also affects how we perceive relationships. Sometimes we hold on to people, not because they bring us peace, but because they represent time spent. We tell ourselves, "I can't walk away after all we've been through." But love that requires endurance without joy becomes debt. True connection grows from choice, not obligation. When you stay simply because leaving would mean the past was wasted, you're sacrificing the present to protect an illusion. No time shared is ever wasted if it helped you grow, even if it ended. Think of the mind like a bookshelf. Every effort, every memory, every loss sits there, collecting dust. The sunk cost fallacy is the hand that keeps you from removing old volumes. It whispers, keep it. You might need it again. But shelves, like hearts, have limited space. To make room for new stories, you must let go of the old. Otherwise, the weight of what once mattered prevents you from living what matters now. Economists often use a phrase, don't throw good money after bad. It means stop adding effort to something already lost. But this wisdom applies to the soul as much as to finance. Don't throw good time after regret. Don't throw good love after resentment. Don't throw your current self after your past one. Each moment deserves fresh intention, not inherited obligation. Releasing the past doesn't erase it. It honors it. It says, thank you for what you taught me, but I don't need to keep carrying you. There's a quiet strength in walking away without bitterness. It means you've learned to separate growth from guilt. The world measures persistence as success, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop. To stop investing in what no longer gives returns, emotional or otherwise. Stopping is not quitting, it's awakening. Ask yourself this: if you were starting today, would you still choose this? If the answer is no, the only thing keeping you there is the past, and the past is already gone. Your future doesn't ask for repayment, it asks for freedom. The moment you realize you owe nothing to what no longer serves you, the weight of the sunk cost falls away. And in that moment, space opens. Space for new dreams, new directions, new peace. The sunk cost fallacy reminds us that holding on is not always strength. Sometimes letting go is the only way forward. What matters isn't how much you've given, but how much life still waits for you beyond the giving. Every ending, when accepted, becomes a form of renewal. You are not wasting what you leave behind. You are honoring what it gave you and choosing to grow beyond it. Social proof illusion. Imagine walking down a quiet street at night and hearing laughter spill from a nearby cafe. You glance through the window and see people smiling, clinking glasses, lost in conversation. You weren't planning to stop, but suddenly you want to. Something inside whispers, if they're enjoying it, it must be good. You walk in, order a drink, and join the atmosphere without even realizing why. That subtle pull, the invisible nudge of others' behavior shaping your own, is called the social proof illusion. One of the most powerful forces guiding human thought and action. Social proof is the brain's way of asking others, what's safe? What's right? What's real? When we're uncertain, we look outward for cues. If everyone's doing something, we assume it must be correct. If others approve of an idea, we feel safer accepting it. It's a shortcut, a way for the mind to outsource decision-making. But what begins as survival instinct often becomes submission to the crowd. This tendency is ancient, woven deep into the fabric of human evolution. For our ancestors, survival depended on belonging. To be alone meant danger, predators, starvation, exile. So the brain learned to follow the group. If others ran from the forest, you ran too. If others gathered berries, you joined them. Conformity wasn't weakness, it was safety. But in the modern world, this instinct translates into something more subtle, the illusion that the crowd must know better than the individual. Psychologist Solomon Asch's famous experiments in the 1950s revealed just how strong this pull can be. Participants were shown simple lines on paper and asked to match their lengths, an easy, objective task. But when confederates in the group intentionally gave wrong answers, many participants conformed, agreeing with obviously incorrect choices. They doubted their own perception because the crowd disagreed. Even clear truth can bend beneath the pressure of belonging. That's the silent power of social proof. It doesn't argue, it suggests. And suggestion, repeated often enough, becomes belief. In today's world, this illusion is amplified by visibility. Social media has turned popularity into validation and consensus into comfort. When a post has thousands of likes, we assume it's worth reading. When a video goes viral, we assume it must be good. The number beside the content becomes a silent signal. Everyone believes this. Maybe you should too. It feels harmless, but slowly, it teaches the brain to equate truth with attention. And when attention becomes proof, authenticity fades. Social proof also shapes morality. We often define right and wrong not by our inner compass, but by the group we belong to. When everyone around us accepts a certain behavior, we stop questioning it. Crowds create their own ethics, and individuals absorb them. History is filled with examples. Moments when collective agreement justified cruelty, and silence disguised fear as consent. When enough people do something, it starts to feel normal. even when it isn't right. That's why awareness of social proof isn't just psychological, it's moral. It reminds us that crowds can be wrong and solitude can be sacred. The social proof illusion also influences desire. We often want what others want simply because they want it. This is the basis of trends, fashion, and status. A product sells not because it's needed, but because it's seen. A song becomes a hit not because it's beautiful, but because it's played everywhere. When something is popular, the mind mistakes repetition for truth. It whispers, "So many people can't be wrong." And in that whisper, individuality erodes a little more. This illusion doesn't only operate on large scales, it governs the quiet corners of our lives. We laugh when others laugh, even if we didn't understand the joke. We applaud when others clap, even if we didn't enjoy the performance. We pretend to know, to agree, to care. Because standing apart feels risky, we follow invisible rules that say, blend in, don't question, stay safe. And the more we do, the more the illusion grows. The illusion that safety and belonging are the same as truth. But the truth often lives at the edge of the crowd. Progress, art, and wisdom have always begun with those willing to stand alone. Every revolutionary idea, every invention, philosophy, and movement started as dissent. Someone, somewhere, saw the crowd moving one way and quietly chose another. That choice is not arrogance, it's awareness. It's the moment you realize that agreement doesn't equal understanding and noise doesn't equal knowledge. Still, social proof isn't entirely harmful. It's how we learn, how we connect. Children imitate adults to survive. Communities share customs to create harmony. Even now, watching others can guide us towards safety, if we choose our examples wisely. The illusion becomes dangerous only when it replaces reflection, when we stop asking why and start assuming because everyone does. Think of how this shapes your digital world. Every like, every share, every review is a modern echo of the ancient campfire. Voices telling you what's worthy. But not all fires warm. Some simply burn bright. When you scroll through endless feeds of approval, remember, visibility doesn't equal value. The algorithms that show you what's popular don't know truth. They know attention. And attention by nature chases extremes. That's why outrage, fear, and spectacle spread faster than sincerity. Social proof amplifies emotion, not accuracy. In relationships, this illusion often hides behind peer pressure. We adopt habits, opinions, even dreams from the people we admire. We shape our goals to fit the expectations of the group. Sometimes we call it loyalty. Sometimes we call it love. But beneath it lies the quiet question, who would I be if no one were watching? It's a question few dare to answer honestly. Because to do so is to step out of the comfort of agreement and into the quiet of authenticity. There's beauty in belonging, but danger in disappearing within it. The social proof illusion teaches us how fragile individuality can be. When surrounded by agreement, courage becomes silence. And yet every meaningful act of truth begins in that silence. To think for yourself doesn't mean rejecting others. It means listening without surrendering your sight. It means seeing the crowd, understanding it, and still choosing your own step. Sometimes, the illusion of social proof can even shape identity itself. People become who the crowd expects them to be. They play roles designed for approval, dressing, speaking, thinking according to the accepted script. But deep inside, a quieter self waits. One that doesn't crave applause, only alignment. When you live for validation, you become a mirror of others' preferences. When you live for truth, you become a reflection of your own light. That's the difference between performing life and living it. Understanding the social proof illusion doesn't mean rejecting society. It means seeing its influence clearly. You can observe the crowd without dissolving into it. You can learn from others without losing your voice. Awareness turns imitation into choice. It lets you follow when it feels right and step aside when it doesn't. It returns you to the power of independent thought, the foundation of real freedom. Try noticing, just for one day, how often you make decisions because others seem to. Which cafe you choose, which video you click, which opinion you agree with, because silence would feel uncomfortable. Each moment of awareness pulls back the curtain of the illusion, and with time, you begin to live less like an echo and more like a note, distinct, deliberate, true. The social proof illusion reminds us that humanity's greatest strength, connection, can also be its greatest weakness. We are wired to belong, but belonging should never cost us our perception. The crowd is not always wrong, but it is not always right. To find balance is to walk among others while still hearing your own footsteps. Because sometimes, the most honest path forward begins when you stop asking, "What are they doing?" and start asking, "What do I believe?" Authority bias. Picture a doctor in a crisp white coat walking into a room. Their tone is calm, their movements assured, their badge gleaming under fluorescent light. They speak and you listen. They recommend a treatment and you nod. Even if part of you feels uncertain, you trust not because you've analyzed the evidence, but because of who they are, or rather, who you believe them to be. That quiet submission to perceived authority, that instinct to obey expertise without question, is known as authority bias. Authority bias is the mind's tendency to give greater weight to the opinions, advice or commands of someone seen as an authority figure, regardless of the content's accuracy or morality. We defer to symbols of power, status, or expertise because they create a feeling of safety. The voice of authority feels certain in a world that is uncertain. It feels ordered in a life that is often chaotic, and so the brain relaxes. It stops questioning, assuming that someone wiser has already done the thinking. This illusion is one of the oldest and most enduring aspects of social psychology. It was famously revealed in Stanley Milgram's experiments at Yale University in the 1960s. Participants believed they were helping with a study on learning by administering electric shocks to another person when they answered incorrectly. Each time, the scientist in the lab coat would calmly instruct, "Please continue." Despite hearing the screams of pain, most participants obeyed, delivering shocks far beyond what they believed was safe, simply because an authority told them to. The results were shocking, not because they revealed cruelty, but because they revealed obedience. Ordinary people, acting under perceived authority, could commit acts they would normally condemn. Authority bias lives not only in laboratories, but in every structure of human society. We see it in classrooms, where students accept a teacher's words as truth without debate. We see it in offices, where employees agree with managers out of habit rather than conviction. We see it in politics, religion, medicine, and media. Wherever symbols of power create emotional comfort, the badge, the title, the uniform, the confident tone, these cues signal authority, and the mind, seeking guidance, surrenders. But this surrender comes at a cost. Authority can blind us. We confuse confidence with competence, presentation with truth. A person who speaks with certainty can seem right even when they're wrong. And those who question authority often face discomfort, isolation, doubt, resistance. It's easier to follow than to stand apart, easier to trust than to verify. That's why authority bias thrives in silence. It feeds on our reluctance to question what feels legitimate. In modern times, this illusion has evolved with technology. We see authority not just in people, but in numbers, algorithms, and headlines. When an article cites experts, we believe it. When a post goes viral or comes from a verified account, we assume credibility. When an AI, a system, or a news anchor speaks with precision, we assume neutrality. But authority has changed shape. It's no longer just the person in the white coat or the suit. It's the digital interface, the corporate logo, the source. Our new authorities are faceless, yet they command obedience all the same. Authority bias isn't inherently evil. It can also be beneficial. Deference to expertise helps societies function. We trust doctors because we can't all study medicine. We trust pilots, engineers, and scientists because specialization allows civilization to thrive. The danger arises when trust turns blind, when authority becomes unquestionable. Because at that point, truth becomes secondary to hierarchy. Think of how easily symbols trigger respect. A man in a suit commands attention. A person with followers commands influence. A speaker with a microphone commands silence. None of these signals guarantee wisdom. They only create the illusion of it. The human brain evolved to read cues of dominance and confidence as indicators of knowledge and strength. In the wild, following the leader often meant survival. But in the modern world, it can mean manipulation. Consider how marketing uses authority bias. Commercials feature actors dressed as doctors promoting products they've never used. Endorsements from experts and research-backed claims build trust, even when the research is vague or cherry-picked. The very word official activates belief. It tells the subconscious, you don't have to question this. Someone already has. That's how persuasion hides behind professionalism. In organizations, authority bias can silence innovation. Employees hesitate to speak up when leaders dominate conversation. Brilliant ideas die in boardrooms because questioning a superior feels unsafe. History is full of disasters born from obedience, from failed engineering projects to corporate collapses. Not because people lacked knowledge, but because they feared challenging authority. In every such case, the illusion of hierarchy outweighed the value of truth. Authority also shapes morality. When commands come from someone powerful, they feel justified. This is why soldiers may follow immoral orders, and citizens may accept unjust laws. The weight of authority transfers responsibility. Obedience feels virtuous. Rebellion feels wrong. But moral clarity often lives on the edge of disobedience. It belongs to those willing to question the rules, not to those who follow them without pause. In personal life, authority bias can quietly govern your sense of worth. If someone older, richer, or more experienced disapproves of your path, you may feel compelled to doubt yourself. If a teacher once told you you'd never succeed, that voice may echo in your mind long after the lesson ended. Authority doesn't always come from titles. It often comes from memories. We carry internal authorities, voices we've elevated over time, and we obey them even when they no longer serve us. Awareness means noticing when those voices speak and gently asking, are they still right? The path to freedom from authority bias isn't rebellion, it's discernment. You don't have to reject authority, only to understand it. Question what you hear, no matter who says it. Ask for evidence, not tone. Trust competence, not confidence. Respect wisdom, not status. And most importantly, learn to recognize your own authority. The quiet intuition that speaks when you pause long enough to listen. Because authority, at its healthiest, isn't about power. It's about trust that's earned. Real authority doesn't demand obedience. It invites understanding. It doesn't silence others. It encourages dialogue. When you meet someone truly wise, you'll notice they don't insist. They explain. They don't dominate. They illuminate. That is authority without illusion. Power without pride. In a world overflowing with information, authority has become both easier and harder to define. Every voice online claims expertise. Every post claims truth. But genuine authority is quiet. It lives not in noise, but in nuance. The ability to admit uncertainty is often the truest sign of knowledge. Beware those who never doubt. They are the ones most likely to lead others blindly. The authority. Bias reminds us that trust is sacred and it should be given carefully. To question authority is not disrespect, it's responsibility. The balance lies not in cynicism, but in consciousness. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, you transform authority from a master into a guide. And the truth, once seen, no longer needs a title to be believed. Bandwagon effect. Picture a crowd gathered in a city square. One person begins to clap, slowly, rhythmically, and within seconds others join in. Soon, hundreds of hands are clapping in perfect unison. You don't even know why it started, but you find yourself joining too. It feels natural, safe, and strangely satisfying. That instinct, to follow simply because others are doing so, is the bandwagon effect. One of the most common psychological illusions that shape our collective behavior without us ever realizing it. The bandwagon effect describes the human tendency to adopt beliefs, ideas, or actions simply because many other people have already done so. It's the invisible force behind trends, movements, and mass behaviors. The reason fashion spreads, opinions multiply, and crowds move as one. When something becomes popular, it begins to feel right, even before we've thought about whether it truly is. Popularity becomes its own proof. The more people who believe something, the harder it becomes to stand apart from it. This illusion has deep evolutionary roots. For ancient humans, survival depended on the tribe. To go against the group was to risk isolation, and isolation often meant death. So the mind learned a rule. If others are doing it, it must be safe. In a world of uncertainty, the crowd's direction became a compass. That ancient instinct still lives in us, not in the jungle, but in the marketplace, the voting booth, the comment section, and even the way we choose our words. You can see the bandwagon effect everywhere. A restaurant with a long line outside attracts even more people, not because the food is proven better, but because the line itself signals quality. A post with 1,000 likes gains 1,000 more. A stock price rising sharply tempts more investors to buy, not because of careful analysis, but because everyone else is. The crowd's momentum becomes a substitute for logic. We don't ask why it's happening. We just assume there must be a reason. The mind equates majority with truth. This bias was famously studied in the 1950s by social psychologist Solomon Asch, the same researcher who explored conformity. He found that people would knowingly agree with an incorrect answer to a simple visual question, just because the rest of the group agreed. The pressure wasn't spoken, it was felt. Disagreeing with the group made participants anxious, even when the truth was obvious. That's the bandwagon effect at its purest. The need to belong outweighs the need to be right. In modern society, this illusion has evolved through technology. Social media magnifies the bandwagon like never before. Trends appear overnight, hashtags spread across continents, and collective attention becomes currency. What's trending today defines what people talk about tomorrow. The more visibility something gets, the more legitimate it feels. And so perception spirals. Popularity feeds popularity until it becomes indistinguishable from truth. In a digital age, algorithms have become the new bandwagon drivers. Think of how often you've watched a video simply because millions of others had. You might not even like it, yet curiosity takes over. Why is everyone watching this? That question is the seed of the illusion. You're not drawn to the content itself, but to the social validation attached to it. The crowd becomes your critic, your guide, and sometimes your conscience. It tells you what's funny, what's valuable, what's in, and soon, your sense of individuality blurs quietly into collective rhythm. The bandwagon effect doesn't only shape entertainment, it shapes identity. People adopt political views, religious beliefs, and cultural opinions because they align with the majority of their group. The more people who hold a belief, the more natural it feels to share it. Disagreeing can feel uncomfortable, even dangerous. And so, we learn to echo what others say rather than speak our truth. This is how entire societies drift, not because individuals are weak, but because belonging feels safer than questioning. It happens in markets too. When investors see others buying into a stock, they rush to join, driving prices higher until the bubble bursts. When everyone sells, they sell too, deepening the fall. The bandwagon moves both ways, driven not by reason, but by emotion. Fear and greed disguised as logic. Economies rise and fall on waves of collective momentum, and at the heart of it is one simple illusion. Everyone can't be wrong, but history shows, again and again, that everyone can. The bandwagon effect also governs social movements. Sometimes, this power leads to progress, when millions unite for justice, equality, or change. Other times, it leads to harm, when crowds turn against individuals, or misinformation spreads unchecked. The bandwagon itself is neutral. Its morality depends on direction. The danger lies not in movement, but in unawareness. When people no longer ask where the wagon is headed, only how to stay on it. There's a psychological comfort in the bandwagon. It replaces uncertainty with clarity. If everyone's doing it, it must be fine. It replaces loneliness with connection. You belong because you agree, but that comfort comes with a price. The quiet erosion of authenticity. When you stop thinking independently, your choices no longer reflect you. They reflect the rhythm of the crowd, the echo of approval, the hum of belonging. Awareness of this illusion doesn't mean rejecting every trend or group idea. It means slowing down enough to ask yourself, do I believe this because I've thought about it, or because I've seen it repeated? It means learning to pause before following, to check if the direction aligns with your own values, not just with others' enthusiasm. You can still move with the crowd when it feels right, but you'll be doing it consciously, not reflexively. In relationships, the bandwagon effect appears when people shape their opinions to fit in. A friend group dislikes someone, so you do too. Everyone praises a certain film, so you pretend to enjoy it. These moments seem small, but they accumulate, shaping your sense of self. Each time you trade truth for approval, the bandwagon grows heavier and your voice grows quieter. But the moment you choose to speak your real thoughts, even gently, you step off, and the ground beneath you feels solid again. The illusion also explains how social proof multiplies. When we see others supporting something, we assume they know something we don't. So we join, not out of ignorance, but out of trust. And the more people join, the stronger that trust becomes. It's a feedback loop, a system that sustains itself simply because it exists. That's how myths, rumors, and even false ideas can spread faster than truth. Truth moves slowly. Popularity runs fast. But there's another side to this story. a hopeful one. The same force that spreads ignorance can also spread awareness. Movements for peace, empathy, and progress begin with a few brave voices and grow when others join. Sometimes the bandwagon can carry humanity forward. When kindness becomes contagious, when awareness becomes a trend, the illusion works in favor of light instead of noise. The key is to stay conscious of which wagon you climb onto and why. To see through the bandwagon effect is to reclaim your individuality. It doesn't mean standing alone forever. It means knowing when to stand still while the world rushes by. It means realizing that truth doesn't need a crowd to exist. It's steady, even when unseen. And sometimes, the truest act of courage isn't joining the noise. It's choosing silence until your heart speaks clearly. The bandwagon effect reminds us of something deeply human, our longing to belong. We are social creatures built to move together, but true belonging doesn't come from imitation, it comes from authenticity. The crowd may change direction 100 times, but your inner compass remains constant if you learn to listen to it. So pause, breathe, and ask yourself gently, if no one else were watching, what would I still choose? Groupthink. Imagine a meeting room filled with polite smiles and quiet agreement. The leader speaks, the others nod, pens move, and no one interrupts. The decision seems unanimous, simple, harmonious, efficient. But behind those nods hides uncertainty. Someone disagrees, someone hesitates, someone knows the plan is flawed, yet no one speaks. That silence, dressed as unity, is one of the most deceptive illusions of human psychology. The groupthink phenomenon. Groupthink occurs when a group values harmony and consensus more than truth or critical thought. In the desire to keep peace, disagreement feels like betrayal. People suppress doubts to maintain unity. The illusion of agreement replaces real agreement, and collective confidence replaces careful reasoning. The result often feels smooth, until it collapses. Psychologist Irving Janis coined the term groupthink in the 1970s, while studying major historical decisions that ended in failure. He found that in many political and military crises, disastrous choices were not made out of malice or ignorance, but out of conformity. Groups of intelligent, capable people reached wrong conclusions because they feared disrupting the group's sense of solidarity. They preferred comfort over conflict, and paid dearly for it. Think of some of history's greatest misjudgments: failed wars, corporate collapses, governmental mistakes, and beneath them, you'll often find groupthink. It thrives in close circles, where dissent feels dangerous. When a strong leader dominates conversation, when a team shares the same background or ideology, when pressure to appear unified outweighs curiosity, groupthink blooms. The more cohesive the group, the less likely individuals are to challenge it. Belonging becomes more important than being right. This illusion is subtle because it wears the mask of teamwork. After all, cooperation feels noble, efficient, mature, but harmony, when it silences honesty, becomes a trap. The human need for belonging, the fear of rejection, and the comfort of shared certainty combine to create a soft hypnosis. You stop thinking independently and start thinking collectively. And once that happens, even wrong ideas can feel right, simply because everyone else believes them. Groupthink often starts with small signals. Someone presents an idea confidently, and others hesitate to question it. A leader praises early agreement, calling it alignment. A team member who voices concern is labeled negative or difficult. Gradually, doubt becomes unwelcome. The conversation narrows, and diversity of thought shrinks. The group stops exploring possibilities and begins defending decisions that haven't even been tested. What began as cooperation turns into quiet conformity. The psychology behind it is simple but powerful. Humans are wired to seek social acceptance. Rejection feels like pain, not metaphorically, but neurologically. Studies using brain scans show that social exclusion activates the same areas of the brain as physical injury. So when we're in a group, the mind often prefers emotional safety over intellectual honesty. Silence feels less painful than standing alone. That's why so many meetings end in agreement. Not because everyone believes, but because no one wants to be the first to disagree. But the cost of this illusion can be enormous. In business, it stifles innovation. In government, it clouds judgment. In friendship, it prevents honesty. And in personal life, it silences the voice that says, "This isn't right for me." Groupthink is the death of individuality disguised as harmony. It feels peaceful, until you realize peace built on silence is not peace at all. The illusion thrives on a few key dynamics: a charismatic leader who discourages dissent, a culture that equates disagreement with disloyalty, and a shared fear of standing out. These ingredients form a psychological echo chamber where ideas are repeated, reinforced, and rarely questioned. Each voice mirrors the next until diversity of thought disappears, replaced by the illusion of collective wisdom. You can see this in social media too, where digital tribes form around beliefs, politics, and lifestyles. Within each tribe, agreement becomes identity. Anyone who challenges the dominant opinion is labeled an outsider, a threat. The algorithms amplify sameness, showing you only the views you already agree with. Soon you stop encountering difference altogether. The online group begins to think as one, and to react as one. That's digital groupthink, quiet, contagious, and comfortable. Yet not all groups fall victim to it. Some thrive on difference, creating space for honest debate. The key is psychological safety, the shared understanding that disagreement is not rejection. When people feel safe to speak their minds, collective intelligence expands. When they fear conflict, it shrinks. The healthiest teams, families, and friendships are not those that agree all the time, but those that can disagree without losing respect. If you've ever walked away from a conversation wishing you'd spoken up, you felt the gravity of groupthink. It pulls at you gently, whispering, "It's not worth it. Don't make things uncomfortable." And yet, every meaningful change in history began when someone resisted that whisper. When one person dared to say, "Wait, what if we're wrong?" That simple question has saved lives, improved ideas, and reshaped entire societies. Dissent, when offered with respect, is one of the purest forms of courage. It's important to remember, disagreement doesn't destroy unity, it deepens it. When differences are allowed, groups become more resilient. They see more angles, prepare for more outcomes, and make wiser choices. In contrast, when voices are silenced, blind spots grow. Groupthink may feel efficient in the moment, but it weakens judgment over time. Consensus built without questioning is as fragile as glass, smooth on the surface, but one crack away from breaking. So how can you resist this illusion? Start by cultivating curiosity. Ask, what if the opposite were true? Encourage others to challenge ideas, especially your own. Create small spaces where truth feels safe, even when it's uncomfortable. If you're part of a group, invite the quiet voices to speak. The loudest opinions are not always the wisest ones. Wisdom often hides in hesitation, in the person who sees what others overlook. In your personal life, beware of social pressure disguised as advice. Friends, family, or culture may push you toward paths that don't align with your inner compass. They'll say, "Everyone does it this way," and that sentence will sound comforting. But comfort is not always clarity. Groupthink doesn't only live in meeting rooms. It lives in choices we make to avoid disapproval. Each time you silence your own intuition to fit in, you trade truth for belonging. But true belonging never requires betrayal of self. Groupthink reminds us that unity without diversity is illusion. Real unity isn't built on sameness, it's built on trust. The kind of trust that says, "You can disagree with me, and I'll still value you." That's the foundation of real growth, both personal and collective. It's not easy. It takes humility to question and courage to listen. But it's the only path to genuine wisdom. So next time you find yourself in a room full of nodding heads, pause. Listen not only to what's being said, but to what's being left unsaid. Pay attention to the silence between the words. Sometimes, the truest thought in the room is the one no one dares to voice. And maybe, just maybe, that voice is yours. False consensus effect. Imagine you're sitting with a group of friends, discussing something simple, maybe a movie, a food, or a belief about life. You express your opinion confidently, assuming most of them will agree. But when you look around, you see hesitation, or quiet disagreement. You pause, confused. How could they not see it the same way? It felt so obvious, so universal. That quiet moment of surprise, that realization that others don't share what seemed normal to you, is the essence of the false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is a psychological illusion that makes us overestimate how much other people share our beliefs, opinions, and behaviors. We assume our perspective is common, our choices are reasonable, and our values are widely accepted because they make sense to us. It's not arrogance, but rather the mind's way of keeping life predictable. If everyone sees the world like you do, the world feels safe. If they don't, it feels uncertain, even threatening. So the mind smooths over difference with the illusion of sameness. This bias was first described by psychologists Lee Ross, David Green, and Pamela House in the 1970s. In their experiments, participants were asked to make decisions about everyday moral or social dilemmas, and then predict how many others would make the same choice. The result was consistent. People assumed that their own choice represented the majority view. Those who said yes believed most others would say yes. Those who said no believed most others would say no. The conclusion was clear. Humans project their own perspective onto the collective. Our minds quietly whisper, "Everyone must see it this way." This illusion shapes nearly every part of life, from politics to relationships to personal values. It's why we're shocked when someone votes differently, believes differently, or reacts differently than we expected. We assume our way of thinking is not just logical, but typical. We don't just believe we're right, we believe we're representative. The brain takes the comfort of familiarity and stretches it over the vast diversity of humanity, like a thin blanket trying to cover a mountain. At its root, the false consensus effect is an extension of empathy, or rather, its shortcut. Instead of imagining another person's perspective, the brain substitutes its own. It says, "They probably think what I think." It feels like understanding, but it's actually projection. And projection, though soothing, hides the complexity of human experience. It replaces curiosity with assumption. This illusion grows stronger when we're surrounded by people who share our views. Social circles, workplaces, and online communities often act as mirrors, reflecting our opinions back to us. Each agreement reinforces the sense that our perspective is universal. We begin to live in echo chambers, digital and emotional, where dissent is rare and similarity is celebrated. Inside these bubbles, the illusion of consensus becomes nearly unbreakable. The mind stops asking, "Could I be wrong?" because it rarely hears an answer that challenges it. Technology magnifies this bias. Algorithms on social media show us more of what we already like, more of what we already believe. Your feed becomes a reflection, not a window. You see your values echoed in posts, your thoughts reinforced by headlines, your opinions validated by strangers who think the same. It feels like proof that your view is widespread, but it's only proof that you're surrounded by similarity. Digital life turns the false consensus effect into a feedback loop. Every click builds a mirror, and the more you look, the less you see beyond yourself. In relationships, this illusion can create misunderstanding. You assume your partner or friend sees the situation as you do. And when they don't, you feel frustrated or betrayed. You think, "How could they not know what I meant?" But the truth is, their inner world is built differently. They bring different histories, fears, and definitions to the same moment. Without communication, the false consensus effect turns intimacy into assumption, and assumption into distance. The illusion also influences morality. People often believe their sense of right and wrong is shared by most others. But morality, shaped by culture and experience, varies deeply across the world. What feels self-evident to one group can feel alien to another. The danger arises when we treat personal truth as universal truth, when we stop listening because we assume agreement. That's how societies polarize, not through conflict alone, but through the death of curiosity. In workplaces or communities, the false consensus effect can stifle creativity. Leaders who assume everyone agrees with their vision rarely invite diverse input. Teams that assume shared understanding fail to clarify goals. Even simple projects can collapse under the weight of unspoken differences. It's not disagreement that divides people. It's the illusion that no disagreement exists. On a personal level, this illusion shapes identity. You may believe that your preferences, your humor, your habits, your boundaries are obvious to others, But most people see only what you show them, filtered through their own lens. We live in parallel realities, each one tinted by individual experience. The false consensus effect hides this truth, making us feel normal when in reality, normal doesn't exist. Every person is an outlier in their own way, and that diversity is what keeps humanity dynamic. The illusion isn't all bad. It helps us build connection quickly. When you meet someone and assume they share your perspective, conversation flows easily. It creates warmth and familiarity. The problem begins when assumption replaces awareness. Real connection doesn't come from thinking others are the same. It comes from embracing that they're not. It comes from asking, how do you see it? Instead of assuming, you must see it my way. So how can you see through this illusion? Start by noticing surprise. Whenever you're startled by someone's opinion, take that moment as a reminder. Your assumptions have limits. Ask questions, not to correct but to understand. Curiosity is the antidote to consensus. It invites the unknown back into view. The more perspectives you encounter, the more your mind expands beyond its reflection. You can also challenge the illusion internally. Ask yourself, what if most people don't think like me? Would that change anything? Often the answer reveals humility, the recognition that truth isn't democratic. It doesn't need to be popular to be real. You can hold your belief strongly while still knowing others hold theirs just as sincerely. That balance between conviction and openness is the mark of wisdom. In a larger sense, the false consensus effect teaches compassion. When you understand that your view isn't the default, you begin to see others with softer eyes. You realize that disagreement isn't defiance, it's diversity. It means you're seeing different sides of the same human puzzle. And in that realization, empathy deepens. You stop asking, why can't they see it like me? And start asking, what do they see that I don't? The illusion also carries a quiet invitation to rediscover the world as unfamiliar, to see people not as extensions of yourself, but as mysterious, intricate minds with their own constellations of truth. When you let go of the assumption of sameness, you rediscover wonder. Every conversation becomes exploration. Every difference becomes a doorway. You stop expecting the world to reflect you and start letting it reveal itself. The false consensus effect reminds us that agreement is not as common as we think. And that's a good thing, because real understanding doesn't grow in sameness. It grows in difference. The moment you accept that others see through different windows, your world becomes larger, more colorful, more alive. And perhaps, in that vast diversity of thought, you'll find not contradiction, but connection, built not on illusion, but on genuine curiosity. Spotlight effect. Imagine walking into a room full of people. You adjust your shirt, check your posture, and suddenly become hyper-aware of every step you take. You feel the weight of invisible eyes, watching, judging, noticing. You smile a little too much, move a little too carefully, and leave the room wondering if everyone saw that small mistake you made. But here's the truth. They didn't. Most of them were too busy thinking about their own posture, their own smile, their own invisible audience. That quiet exaggeration of how much others notice us is known as the spotlight effect, the illusion that we are under constant observation. The mind creates this illusion as a byproduct of self-awareness. You live inside your own head every moment of your life, so your actions, words, and mistakes feel enormous. But to others, you are a passing glimpse, one small detail in the vast landscape of their own attention. They see you, yes, but they don't study you. The brain, however, magnifies your presence, placing you on an imaginary stage surrounded by an audience that doesn't actually exist. It's the mind's way of making meaning, but meaning here becomes anxiety. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky first explored this illusion in the early 2000s. In one experiment, they asked students to wear an embarrassing t-shirt, one with a large, awkward picture, and then enter a room of peers. Afterward, they asked each participant to estimate how many people had noticed the shirt. On average, students believed about half the room had noticed. In reality, fewer than 1 in 5 did. The world had been watching far less than they thought. This finding reveals something beautiful and humbling. People are far too busy being the main characters in their own stories to focus much on yours. Everyone lives under their own spotlight, their own bubble of self-consciousness. The truth is freeing, but also bittersweet. No one is paying as much attention as you think. Your mistakes, your imperfections, your small, awkward moments, they fade quickly in others' minds, even if they echo endlessly in yours. The spotlight effect explains why embarrassment feels eternal, but is actually fleeting. You might replay a stumble, a laugh, or a word spoken wrong for hours, yet everyone else has already moved on. The illusion magnifies your flaws because you experience them from the inside, while others see only glimpses from the outside. Your internal movie feels like a high-definition broadcast. Theirs is a quiet blur in the background. We all overestimate how brightly our light, or shadow, shines in others' eyes. But this illusion doesn't only create insecurity, it also creates restraint. The fear of judgment stops people from speaking, dancing, creating, or simply being themselves. We hesitate not because we lack ability, but because we overestimate visibility. We live carefully, cautiously, performing for an audience that rarely notices the performance. And in doing so, we shrink. Not because others demand it, but because we assume they're watching. Yet, once you truly understand the spotlight effect, you feel something shift. You realize the crowd isn't as loud as you imagined. You realize freedom lives in perspective, in knowing that most people are too wrapped in their own self-consciousness to judge you for yours. They're worrying about their own hair, their own voice, their own invisible mistakes. Everyone is under their own spotlight, and most of those lights never intersect. The world isn't watching. It's simply living, like you are. This realization is deeply liberating. It means you can move through life with more ease, more authenticity. It means you can dance without fearing who's watching, speak without rehearsing every word, try without waiting for approval. Because most people won't remember the awkward moments you fear. They'll remember the energy you brought, the honesty you shared. Perfection fades fast, but presence lingers. The spotlight effect also affects ambition. Many people hold back from starting something new, a business, a channel, a creative project, because they fear the judgment of invisible critics. But those critics rarely exist. Even when people notice your effort, they admire your courage far more than they mock your mistakes. The few who judge are reflections of their own fear, not of your worth. And the more you act, despite the illusion, the smaller it becomes. The irony is that the moment you stop worrying about being seen, you start shining naturally. Confidence isn't about believing everyone loves you. It's about knowing it doesn't matter if they don't. It's about realizing that being seen is less important than being real. The illusion fades when you remember that everyone else feels just as exposed, just as uncertain. We're all pretending to be comfortable under lights that were never as bright as we thought. The spotlight effect also invites compassion. When you remember that others are likely worrying about how you perceive them, judgment dissolves. You stop criticizing because you understand. Everyone's trying their best to appear whole in a world that rewards performance. We are all walking mirrors, reflecting fear and hope back at one another. To see that is to soften. To know that is to forgive. Awareness of this illusion can transform your life quietly, but completely. It reminds you that embarrassment doesn't define you. That mistakes are part of your humanity, not proof of your failure. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act even while fear whispers that everyone's watching. Once you see the spotlight for what it is, a trick of perspective, it loses its grip. You step out of the imagined stage and back into real life, where light feels gentle, not blinding. So next time you walk into a room, take a deep breath. Know that the eyes you feel on you are mostly glancing past. Know that your worries are louder in your head than they are in the air. Know that no one remembers the tiny stumble you made last week, or the awkward word you said yesterday. People move on, and so can you. You are free. Freer than you've ever realized. And maybe that's the quiet lesson beneath all these psychological illusions, that the mind's greatest trick is making us feel smaller than we are. It fills us with stories of how we must appear, how others must think, how much we must prove. But in truth, life is gentler, the lights are softer, and no one is watching as closely as we fear. Once you understand that, you begin to live differently, not to impress, but to express, not to perform, but to exist fully. So if you've stayed with me through these hours of reflection, through illusions of attention, Memory, bias, and belief. Take this as your quiet invitation. Step off the imaginary stage. Let the lights dim. Let yourself breathe. You don't need to be perfect to be seen. You just need to be present. And if this journey touched you, if it helped you see your mind with a little more clarity, a little more peace, stay with us. Subscribe, follow, and keep exploring the quiet corners of your own consciousness. Because understanding your mind isn't an ending. It's the beginning of freedom. And every time you return, you'll find new ways to see and new reasons to smile softly at the illusions that once controlled you. You are not the spotlight. You are the light itself. If this calm exploration opened your mind or gave you peace, follow this journey. Subscribe for more deep stories and truths about the mind. A soft place to think, reflect, and grow. Stay curious, stay aware, and keep listening, because your awakening has just begun.